The Jewish Secret of Wealth reveals the ancestral principles that transformed a persecuted and scattered people into one of the most prosperous communities on the planet. You will discover that true Jewish wealth does not begin with money, but with a fundamental reprogramming of how you perceive abundance, value, work, and your purpose in the world. From the Talmud's teachings on prosperity consciousness to modern neuroscience practices that confirm their effectiveness, this audiobook decodes the secrets that have been passed down from generation to generation in the most successful Jewish families. You will learn how structured gratitude creates magnetic fields of abundance, how the concept of tzedakah, charity, actually programs your brain to receive more, and how the chutzpah mindset, sacred boldness, dissolves the limiting beliefs that keep most people in scarcity. This is not a religious approach, but a universal one. The principles presented here work regardless of your background or beliefs, because they are based on laws of consciousness that govern the manifestation of wealth in any culture. Prepare to discover why Jewish people say Mazel and Geld, luck and money, as if they were the same thing, why they celebrate Shabbat as a portal of abundance, and why they teach their children that becoming rich is a mitzvah, a sacred obligation. Most importantly, you will learn how to apply these principles immediately in your own life, reprogramming your consciousness to the frequency of unlimited prosperity. Chapter 1. The Millennial Prosperity Code. What if I told you that one of the most persecuted peoples in human history, a group representing less than 0.2% of the global population, has unlocked a code to prosperity so powerful that it has allowed them not just to survive, but to thrive beyond all statistical probability? What if that code wasn't about money at all, but about something far more fundamental, a complete reprogramming of consciousness itself? This is not a book about Jewish people. This is a book about universal principles of consciousness that have been encoded, tested, and refined over 3,000 years of human experience. These principles work regardless of your background, your current financial situation, or your beliefs. They work because they're based on laws of energy and consciousness that govern how abundance manifests in this physical reality. The Jewish people didn't invent these laws. They discovered them, preserved them, and most importantly, they lived them so consistently that prosperity became woven into the very fabric of their collective consciousness. Let me share something with you that will change how you see wealth forever. When you study the most successful Jewish families throughout history, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, the Lehman brothers, even modern innovators like the founders of Google, Facebook, and countless Fortune 500 companies, you discover something remarkable. They didn't just have better strategies or work harder than everyone else. They operated from a completely different state of consciousness. They had a fundamental belief system about abundance, value, purpose, and their role in the world that was radically different from the scarcity mentality that keeps most people trapped in financial limitation. Think about this for a moment. Throughout history, the Jewish people have been expelled from over 80 countries, stripped of their possessions, forbidden from owning land, excluded from most professions, and subjected to persecution that would break the spirit of any group. Yet somehow, within a generation or two of settling anywhere, they would often become leaders in commerce, finance, science, medicine, and the arts. How is this possible? What do they know about creating wealth that allowed them to rebuild prosperity from nothing, again and again, century after century? The answer isn't in their strategies, it's in their consciousness. It's in the way they've been programmed from childhood to see the world, to see themselves, and to see their relationship with abundance. And here's what's so exciting about this. Consciousness can be reprogrammed. The neural pathways that create a prosperity mindset can be built in your brain right now, regardless of what programming you received growing up. The vibrational frequency of abundance can become your new set point. The beliefs that have kept you in financial limitation can be identified and replaced with the beliefs that create wealth as naturally as breathing. You see, the Jewish prosperity code isn't about religious dogma or cultural exclusivity. It's about specific mental and emotional patterns that have been passed down through generations like a spiritual technology. When you understand these patterns, when you understand how gratitude becomes a magnetic force, how giving actually reprograms your subconscious for receiving, how purpose multiplies prosperity, and how a day of complete rest can accelerate your wealth creation, you gain access to the same consciousness that has created extraordinary success in the most unlikely circumstances. Modern neuroscience is now proving what these ancient teachings have always known. Your brain cannot distinguish between a physical experience and a mental one that's vividly imagined with strong emotion. When Jewish families sit around the Shabbat table and speak blessings over bread and wine, when they recount stories of providence and prosperity, when they discuss business with an expectation of success while maintaining gratitude for what they already have, they are literally rewiring their neural networks for abundance. They're creating new synaptic connections that make prosperity thinking automatic. They're conditioning their autonomic nervous system to expect good things. They're programming their subconscious mind with the frequency of wealth. And this happens whether they're consciously aware of it or not. That's the power of a consciousness code that's been embedded in daily practice for thousands of years. It becomes part of your operating system. It becomes who you are at the level of identity, not just what you do. When prosperity consciousness is your identity, creating wealth isn't something you have to work at. It's simply an expression of who you are. Now I want you to think about your own programming for a moment. What were you taught about money growing up? What did you hear about wealthy people? What beliefs did you absorb about whether there's enough to go around? About whether you deserve abundance? About whether pursuing wealth is spiritual or selfish? Most people have been programmed with scarcity consciousness so deeply that they don't even recognize it as programming. They think it's reality. They think that struggling financially is just how life is, that you have to work hard for every penny, that rich people got lucky or did something wrong, that money is the root of all evil, or that spiritual people shouldn't want material abundance. These beliefs are not truth. They're just programs running in your subconscious mind, and they're creating your financial reality with absolute precision. Your subconscious mind is the most powerful creative force in your personal universe, and it's always working to prove your beliefs right. If you believe at a subconscious level that wealth is scarce, your reticular activating system will filter your perception to show you evidence of scarcity everywhere. If you believe that making money requires struggle, your nervous system will keep you in a state of stress and effort. If you believe that you don't deserve abundance, your behavioral patterns will sabotage opportunities before you even recognize them. But here's the extraordinary truth that changes everything. These programs can be rewritten. Your brain has a quality called neuroplasticity, which means it can form new neural connections at any age. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field 5,000 times stronger than your brain. And when you feel elevated emotions like gratitude, joy, and love, that field becomes coherent and sends signals to your brain to create new patterns. Your genes are not your destiny. Epigenetics has shown us that your thoughts and feelings can actually turn genes on and off. You are not stuck with the financial programming you receive. You can install new software. This is exactly what the Jewish prosperity code does, but it does it systematically through daily practices that have been refined over millennia. Every practice has a purpose, and every purpose serves the goal of maintaining a consciousness that attracts, creates, and sustains wealth. When you understand the why behind practices like making 100 blessings a day, giving away 10% before you calculate your needs, taking one complete day off every week, or speaking about prosperity as if it's your natural state, you realize you're looking at a sophisticated technology for programming the subconscious mind. And the most beautiful part? It works with the fundamental laws of the universe. The law of vibration says that everything is energy vibrating at different frequencies, and like frequencies, attract. When you vibrate at the frequency of gratitude, you attract circumstances that give you more to be grateful for. The law of circulation says that energy must flow to grow. So when you give generously, you create a vacuum that pulls more abundance toward you. The law of gestation says that every seed needs time to grow. So when you rest and allow, you give your intentions time to manifest. The Jewish practices aren't trying to manipulate the universe. They're aligning with how the universe already works. Think about the most successful people you know, whether they're Jewish or not. I'm willing to bet they share certain characteristics. They talk about their vision with absolute certainty, as if it's already happened. They feel grateful before receiving, not just after. They give generously without fear of lack. They take bold action, but they also know when to rest and trust the process. They see opportunities where others see obstacles. They believe that prosperity is their birthright, not something they have to fight for. They understand that wealth isn't just about accumulating, it's about circulating. They know their purpose is bigger than themselves, and that knowing gives them unstoppable energy. These aren't random personality traits. They're the markers of prosperity consciousness, and every single one of them can be found in the Jewish teachings about wealth that we're going to explore together. The difference is that in Jewish tradition, these aren't optional practices for unusually motivated people. They're woven into the fabric of daily life. They're practiced in childhood before critical thinking even develops, which means they bypass the analytical mind and go straight into the subconscious where they become your automatic programming. Now, you might be thinking, but I'm not Jewish. I don't come from that tradition. Can these principles really work for me? Not only can they work for you, they will work better than you can imagine, because you're approaching them consciously. You're choosing them deliberately. You're not just following tradition. You're understanding the science and the spirituality behind each practice, and that understanding amplifies their power exponentially. You get to take 3,000 years of proven results and apply them with the full force of conscious intention, with the backing of modern neuroscience, with the clarity that comes from seeing exactly how and why these practices create wealth consciousness. This is your invitation to a radical transformation, not a transformation of your circumstances first, but a transformation of your consciousness. Because when your consciousness changes, your circumstances have no choice but to follow. You're going to learn how to reprogram your subconscious mind using techniques that have been tested by millions of people over thousands of years. You're going to discover how to align your electromagnetic field with the frequency of abundance. You're going to understand how to turn your body into a magnet for prosperity by changing your emotional state. You're going to learn to see opportunity where you once saw obstacles, possibility where you once saw limitations, and abundance where you once saw scarcity. The journey you're about to begin isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you already are beneath all the programming that's kept you small, beneath your financial struggles, beneath your doubts and fears, beneath every limiting belief you've ever had about money. There is a version of you that is naturally prosperous, effortlessly abundant, and magnetically attractive to wealth in all its forms. That version isn't in your future. It exists right now in the quantum field of infinite possibility. It's just vibrating at a different frequency than the version of you that's struggling with money. Every principle you learn in this book is designed to help you tune your consciousness to that frequency. Every practice is meant to close the gap between who you've been and who you're capable of becoming. Every insight is a key that unlocks a door in your awareness, revealing possibilities that have always been there, but that you couldn't see through the filter of scarcity consciousness. And as you begin to embody these principles, something remarkable will happen. Prosperity will stop being something you pursue and become something you are. Wealth will stop being something you lack and become something you naturally express. Abundance will stop being a distant dream and become your lived reality. The Jewish people have maintained their prosperity code through celebrations that reinforce abundance consciousness, through stories that program expectation of providence, through daily practices that keep them aligned with the frequency of wealth, and through education that instills prosperity. Thinking before limiting beliefs can take root. They've survived and thrived because they refused to accept poverty consciousness, even when poverty was forced upon them. They rebuilt because they carried the code of prosperity in their consciousness, not in their bank accounts. They prospered because they understood something fundamental. Wealth is not what you have, it's who you are. And who you are is about to change in ways you cannot yet imagine. As you absorb these teachings, as you practice these principles, as you align your consciousness with the frequency of abundance, you will begin to notice shifts. At first, they'll be subtle. A change in how you feel when you think about money, an opportunity that appears out of nowhere, a sense of possibility where there used to be anxiety. But those shifts will compound. They'll build on each other. They'll create momentum. And one day, sooner than you think, you'll look at your life and realize that you're not the same person who started this journey. You'll have become someone who naturally attracts wealth, who effortlessly creates opportunities, who magnetically draws prosperity in all its forms. This is not wishful thinking. This is not positive affirmations that override your real feeling. This is a systematic reprogramming of your subconscious mind, using principles that have been proven effective by one of the most successful groups in human history. This is you, learning to work with the fundamental laws of consciousness that govern manifestation in the physical world. This is you finally understanding that you were never meant to struggle, that abundance is your natural state, and that the only thing standing between you and the wealth you desire is the programming in your mind, programming that you're about to change forever. So as you prepare to discover the Jewish secret of wealth, I want you to make a decision right now. Decide that you're not just reading this to learn interesting concepts. Decide that you're here to transform. Decide that you're going to allow these principles to reprogram your consciousness at the deepest level. Decide that you're ready to release every limiting belief about money that you've been carrying. Decide that you're worthy of abundance, that prosperity is your birthright, and that the wealth you desire is already making its way to you. It's just waiting for you to become the vibrational match for receiving it. The code is about to be revealed. The door is opening, and on the other side is a version of you who lives in abundance, so natural, so effortless, so consistent, that you'll wonder how you ever believed anything else was possible. That version of you is calling. Are you ready to answer? Chapter 2. Berachah, the science of programmed gratitude. There's a practice in Jewish tradition that seems almost obsessive to outsiders. Orthodox Jews are taught to make 100 blessings every single day, 100 moments where they pause, become present, and acknowledge abundance. They bless their food before eating. They bless water before drinking. They bless when they wake up, when they see a rainbow, when they hear good news, when they smell fragrant flowers, even when they use the bathroom. To the uninitiated, this might seem like religious compulsion or meaningless ritual. But what if I told you this is actually one of the most sophisticated tools for wealth consciousness ever developed? What if these 100 daily blessings are literally rewiring the brain to perceive, attract, and multiply abundance? Let me explain something crucial about how your brain works. Your reticular activating system, a small network of neurons at the base of your brainstem, acts as a filter for the 2 million bits of information that bombard your senses every single second. Without this filter, you'd be overwhelmed into complete dysfunction. So your RAS filter's reality, based on what you've told it, is important. It shows you what matches your beliefs, your focus, and your emotional patterns. This is why when you buy a new car, you suddenly see that same car everywhere. The cars were always there. You just weren't programmed to notice them. Now here's where this becomes extraordinary. When you train yourself to bless 100 things daily, you're programming your RAS to search for things worthy of blessing. You're commanding your brain to find abundance, beauty, provision, and gifts in every moment. And your brain is obedient. It will show you exactly what you tell it to look for. The Jewish people who practice this don't just feel more grateful. They literally live in a different perceptual reality than people who never acknowledge abundance. Their brains have been trained through repetition to see opportunities, resources, and blessings that other people's brains filter out as irrelevant. But there's something even more powerful happening beneath the surface. Modern neuroscience has discovered that gratitude isn't just a nice feeling. It's a creative force that changes your brain structure. When you feel genuine gratitude, your brain releases dopamine and serotonin, the neurotransmitters responsible for happiness and well-being. But that's just the beginning. Gratitude also activates the hypothalamus, which regulates stress and stimulates the production of oxytocin, which creates feelings of connection and openness. Most importantly, gratitude activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for complex thinking, decision-making, and recognizing opportunities. Think about what this means. Every time you pause to bless something, to genuinely feel grateful for it, you're bathing your brain in chemicals that make you smarter, more creative, more optimistic, and more likely to see possibilities. You're activating the exact neural networks that successful people use naturally. And when you do this 100 times a day, you're not occasionally dipping into this state. You're making it your dominant frequency. You're reconditioning your nervous system to operate from abundance rather than scarcity. I worked with a woman named Rachel who came to one of my workshops drowning in debt and paralyzed by financial anxiety. She couldn't sleep at night because her mind would race through all the bills she couldn't pay, all the opportunities she'd missed, all the ways she'd failed. Her entire consciousness was locked into the frequency of lack. I taught her the practice of 100 daily blessings, and she looked at me like I was insane. "I have nothing to be grateful for," she said. "I'm about to lose my apartment. How can I pretend everything is fine?" But I explained to her that this wasn't about pretending or denying her circumstances. It was about training her brain to function differently. So she agreed to try, and here's what happened. The first day was torture. She had to force herself to find things to bless. She blessed her morning coffee, her ability to walk, the sunrise, her working refrigerator. It felt fake and uncomfortable. But by day 3, something shifted. She started noticing things she'd never paid attention to before. a neighbor who smiled at her, a parking spot that opened right when she needed it, an unexpected check in the mail for $37 from an insurance refund she'd forgotten about. By week 2, Rachel's entire energy had changed. She was sleeping better because her mind had new patterns to run, patterns of recognition instead of anxiety. She started having ideas for side income streams that had never occurred to her before. By month 2, she'd landed a better job, negotiated down her debt, and felt a sense of possibility she hadn't experienced in years. The circumstances hadn't magically resolved overnight, but her consciousness had shifted so dramatically that she became a different person, the kind of person who spots opportunities, takes action, and creates solutions rather than dwelling in problems. What happened to Rachel wasn't luck, it was neuroscience. By forcing her attention toward abundance 100 times a day, she literally built new neural pathways. The neurons that used to fire together around scarcity and fear started disconnecting, because neurons that don't fire together don't wire together. Meanwhile, new networks were forming around possibility and abundance. Her brain was being restructured, one blessing at a time, until her default mode was no longer anxiety, but expectation. She didn't change her circumstances first, and then feel grateful. She changed her consciousness first, and her circumstances had no choice but to follow. This is the power of programmed gratitude. It's not about feeling good occasionally. It's about systematically reconditioning your entire nervous system to operate from a different frequency. And the Jewish tradition understood this thousands of years before we had brain scanners to prove it. They knew that if you want to create prosperity consciousness in a person, you don't lecture them about positive thinking. You give them a practice so specific, so consistent, and so embedded in daily life that it becomes automatic. You make gratitude their default operating system. But here's what makes the Jewish approach to blessings even more powerful. They don't just thank God in a general way. Each blessing is specific, targeted, and connects the mundane to the miraculous. When blessing bread, they acknowledge the entire chain of creation: the seed, the soil, the rain, the sun, the farmer, the miller, the baker, and the divine intelligence that orchestrated it all. This isn't just gratitude. This is a complete reframe of reality. It's training your mind to see that nothing is random, nothing is ordinary, and everything is connected to an intelligence that's working on your behalf. When you bless water before drinking it, you're not just being polite to a deity. You're programming your subconscious mind with the understanding that this life-giving substance was provided for you, that the universe is set up to support your existence, that you live in a reality where your needs are met. Do this enough time, and your subconscious stops arguing with abundance. It stops producing the stress response that comes from believing you're on your own in a hostile. Instead, it relaxes into trust, and that state of trust is the most magnetic state for attracting wealth. Let me tell you about the science of heart coherence, because this is where gratitude becomes a measurable creative force. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field that extends several feet beyond your body. This isn't metaphysical speculation. It can be measured with sensitive magnetometers. When you feel emotions like frustration, anxiety, or fear, your heart rhythm becomes chaotic and incoherent. This chaotic signal goes to your brain and literally impairs your ability to think clearly, make good decisions, and perceive accurately. You're operating in survival mode, and in survival mode, your brain cannot access the higher cognitive functions needed to create wealth. But when you feel elevated emotions like gratitude, love, or joy, something remarkable happens. Your heart rhythm becomes smooth, coherent, and organized. This coherent signal goes to your brain and activates the prefrontal cortex, enhancing your cognitive ability your creativity, and your perception. But it doesn't stop there. This coherent electromagnetic field also radiates out from your body. And here's what the research shows. Coherent electromagnetic fields are the language of manifestation. They interact with the quantum field, the invisible matrix of energy that underlies all physical reality, and they literally draw matching circumstances and opportunities toward you. This is not mysticism. This is physics. Everything in the universe is energy vibrating at different frequencies, and like frequencies, attract each other. When your heart is generating a coherent field based on gratitude, you're broadcasting a signal that says, abundance, and the quantum field responds by collapsing possibilities that match that frequency into your physical reality. You start encountering the right people at the right time. Resources appear, doors open. You call it luck or coincidence, but it's actually resonance. You're not attracting these things through magical thinking. You're attracting them through the actual electromagnetic frequency you're generating. The Jewish practice of 100 daily blessings is a technology for maintaining heart coherence. Every time you pause to bless something, you're taking yourself out of the chaos of daily stress and into a moment of appreciation. You're shifting from survival mode to creation mode. You're generating a coherent signal, and when you do this 100 times a day, you're not occasionally tapping into this power, you're living in it. You become a walking magnet for abundance because you're consistently broadcasting the frequency that attracts it. Now, I want to address something important. Some people hear about gratitude practices and think, I've tried that. I wrote in a gratitude journal for a week, and nothing changed. Here's the difference. Occasional gratitude when you feel like it is nice, but it's not powerful enough to reprogram your subconscious. Your subconscious mind learns through repetition and emotion. It needs consistent signals, repeated patterns, and elevated emotional states to build new neural pathways and override old programming. Writing 3 things you're grateful for before bed is a start. But it's like doing 1 push-up and wondering why you're not strong. The Jewish approach is different. It's systematic, it's constant, and it's woven into every aspect of daily life. You're not trying to feel grateful. You're training your nervous system to operate from gratitude as your baseline state. There's a huge difference. One is an occasional practice when you remember or when you need to feel better. The other is a complete reconditioning of your consciousness. It's the difference between visiting a gym once a week and living an athletic lifestyle. One might make you feel momentarily good. The other transforms your entire physiology. And here's what happens when gratitude becomes your dominant frequency. Your subconscious mind, which controls 95% of your behavior, starts operating from the assumption that you live in an abundant universe. It stops running the old programs of worry, scarcity, and defensive survival strategies. Instead, it starts generating thoughts, impulses, and actions that align with abundance. You become more generous because your subconscious isn't afraid of running out. You take bigger risks because your subconscious believes you're supported. You spot opportunities faster because your RAS is programmed to look for them. You feel deserving of wealth because your daily practice has convinced your subconscious that abundance is normal for you. This is why the most successful Jewish families teach this practice to children before they can even understand the words. They're installing prosperity consciousness before critical thinking develops, before limiting beliefs can take root. The children grow up with nervous systems that are pre-wired for abundance. Gratitude isn't something they have to work at. It's their automatic response. And that automatic response creates an automatic attraction to wealth. But even if you didn't receive this programming as a child, you can install it now. Your brain's neuroplasticity means you can build new pathways at any age. The question is, are you willing to commit to the practice? Not just when you feel like it, not just when things are going well, but as a non-negotiable daily discipline that you honor no matter what. Because that's what it takes to reprogram the subconscious. That's what it takes to shift from occasional gratitude to constant abundance consciousness. Let me give you the specific practice. Starting now, I want you to make 100 acknowledgments of abundance every day. I call them acknowledgments rather than blessings, because you don't need to follow any religious format. Simply pause, notice something you have, or something that's working, and internally acknowledge it. I acknowledge this warm bed I'm lying in. I acknowledge that my body is breathing without my conscious control. I acknowledge this water that's quenching my thirst. I acknowledge the roof over my head. I acknowledge my ability to see these words. At first, you might need to count them deliberately. Keep a small notepad or use your phone to track. Force yourself to reach 100. You'll discover that you have to become incredibly present to do this. You can't stay lost in worry about the future or regret about the past when you're actively searching for things to acknowledge in the present moment. And that presence itself is healing. That presence is where your power lives. You can't create from the past or the future. You can only create from now. And gratitude is the fastest way to become fully present. As you continue this practice, something extraordinary will happen. You'll start to notice that your mind automatically looks for things to appreciate, even when you're not consciously doing the practice. You'll be in a difficult situation and suddenly you'll spot something positive that you would have completely missed before. This isn't you becoming naive or ignoring problems. This is your brain learning to function at a higher level. You're training it to see solutions instead of just problems, opportunities instead of just obstacles, resources instead of just limitations. And then the really magical phase begins. You'll start noticing that the things you acknowledge seem to multiply. When you acknowledge your good health, you find yourself naturally making healthier choices. When you acknowledge unexpected money, more unexpected money appears. When you acknowledge helpful people, more helpful people show up in your life. This isn't coincidence. It's how consciousness works. What you focus on expands. What you appreciate appreciates. The universe responds to your frequency with matching circumstances. The Jewish tradition has a saying, "The more you thank God, the more God gives you to be thankful for." Whether you frame this as God, the universe, the quantum field, or your own subconscious mind doesn't matter. The principle is the same. Gratitude isn't just a response to abundance. It's the cause of it. It's not something you do after you receive. It's something you do to create the state of consciousness that makes you a magnet for receiving. Think about the people you know who complain constantly. They might have more than others, but they never feel abundant because their consciousness is locked in scarcity. Their RAS shows them everything that's wrong, missing, or unfair. Their heart generates chaotic fields. Their subconscious believes the world is against them, and so their reality matches their frequency. More problems, more struggle, more evidence that life is hard. They're not unlucky. They're operating from a frequency that attracts struggle. Now think about people you know who seem blessed. Things just work out for them. Opportunities appear. Problems resolve themselves. Money flows. These people aren't objectively luckier. They're operating from a different frequency. Their consciousness is tuned to abundance, so that's what shows up in their experience. And one of the fastest ways to tune your consciousness to that frequency is through systematic, programmed gratitude. This is the secret that the Jewish practice of 100 daily blessings has preserved for thousands of years. It's not about appeasing a deity or following rules. It's about installing prosperity consciousness so deeply that it becomes who you are. It's about training your brain to function the way wealthy people's brains naturally function. It's about generating the electromagnetic frequency that attracts abundance. It's about reprogramming your subconscious to expect provision rather than lack. And the beauty of this practice is that you can start right now, exactly where you are. You don't need money to be grateful. You don't need perfect circumstances. In fact, the practice is most powerful when you begin it while things are still challenging, because that's when you're actively overriding the scarcity programming. Every time you acknowledge abundance when your circumstances scream lack, you're building new neural pathways that are stronger than the old ones. You're proving to your subconscious that abundance exists, independent of current conditions. You're teaching yourself to vibrate at a frequency that will change those conditions. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, begin this practice. Find 100 things to acknowledge: your pillow, your heartbeat, the air you're breathing, the fact that you have access to this knowledge, the ability to read or listen. Each acknowledgement is a seed you're planting in your subconscious. Each one is rewiring your brain. Each one is shifting your frequency. And as you drift into sleep, your subconscious mind will take those seeds and begin growing them into new patterns of thought, new expectation, new perception. You'll wake up slightly different than you were today. And if you continue this practice, that slight difference will compound into a completely transformed relationship with abundance. This is your invitation to join the frequency of prosperity. One acknowledgement at a time, 100 times a day, every day, until gratitude becomes as automatic as breathing, until abundance becomes your natural expectation, until your entire consciousness has been restructured to see, attract, and multiply wealth in every. The practice is simple. The results are extraordinary. And the transformation begins the moment you decide that you're ready to see your world differently. Chapter 3, Tzedakah, the paradox of giving to receive. Here's a concept that will challenge everything you've been taught about money. The fastest way to program your subconscious mind for wealth is to give money away before you feel you can afford to. I know this sounds counterintuitive, possibly even reckless, but stay with me because what I'm about to share with you is one of the most powerful prosperity principles ever discovered. The Jewish practice of tzedakah, which is often mistranslated as charity, but actually means righteousness or justice, requires giving away at least 10% of your income before calculating your expenses. Not after you've paid your bill, not if there's anything left over. Before, first, as a non-negotiable practice that comes before food, before rent, before anything else. To most people living in scarcity consciousness, this seems insane. How can I give away money I don't have? I'm barely surviving as it is. Maybe when I'm wealthy I'll be generous, but right now, I need every penny. And that thought, right there, that very reasonable and logical thought, is exactly what keeps people trapped in financial limitation. Because your subconscious mind is always listening to your actions, and your actions speak much louder than your words. When you hoard money, when you grip it tightly, when you refuse to let it flow, you're sending a massive signal to your subconscious that there isn't enough, that you live in a scarce universe, that you need to protect and defend because abundance is limited. And your subconscious, being the faithful servant that it is, says, okay, you live in scarcity, and creates more experiences of scarcity to prove you right. But when you give first, especially when it feels uncomfortable, you're sending a completely different signal to your subconscious. You're declaring with your actions that you trust abundance, that you believe more is coming, that you're not operating from fear but from faith in the infinite supply. Your subconscious receives this signal and says, "Oh, this person believes they're abundant. They're giving away money, which means they must have plenty. Let me create more experiences that match this consciousness." And then your RAS, your reticular activating system, starts showing you opportunities you were blind to before. Your creativity activates. Your courage increases. Your magnetic field shifts, and money starts flowing toward you from unexpected directions. Let me tell you about David, a man who came to one of my workshops completely broke. He'd lost his business. His savings were gone. He was living on his friend's couch, and he had maybe $300 to his name. When I explained the principle of tzedakah, of giving 10% first, he actually laughed. "Joe, I can't give away $30. I need that for food. This principle might work for people who have money, but I'm at zero. I have to get back on my feet first, and then I'll give." I looked at him and said, "David, you've been waiting to get back on your feet for how long now?" He went quiet. 8 months, he finally admitted. "And what's changed in those 8 months?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "Exactly. Because you're stuck in survival consciousness, and survival consciousness cannot create wealth. It can only create more survival." I challenged David to do something radical. I told him to give away $30 that week to someone who needed it more than he did, and to do it with a feeling of joy and abundance, as if he were a millionaire making a generous donation. He thought I was crazy, but something in him decided to try it. So he found a homeless shelter and donated $30 with a genuine smile, imagining he was giving $30,000. And here's what happened. The very next day, a former colleague called him out of the blue about a consulting project. Within 2 weeks, David had made $6,000. Within 2 months, he had steady income. Within 6 months, he'd rebuilt his business and was making more than he had before the crash. Was this coincidence? Did the universe magically reward him for his $30 donation? No. What happened was his consciousness shifted. For the first time in 8 months, David took an action that came from abundance rather than scarcity. That action interrupted the pattern his nervous system had been running. It created a new neural pathway. It signaled to his subconscious that he was no longer in survival mode. And once his subconscious got that signal, everything changed. His body language changed, making him more attractive in conversations. His decision-making changed, making him bolder. His perception changed, making him notice the opportunity when his colleague called. The money didn't appear by magic. It appeared because David became a different person, and that different person naturally attracted different circumstances. This is the paradox of tzedakah. It looks like you're losing money when you give, but actually you're investing in the most important thing, your consciousness. You're buying your way out of scarcity programming. You're proving to yourself that you're abundant, and that proof is worth infinitely more than the money you give away, because that proof changes your identity. When you can give freely, even when it's uncomfortable, you're no longer someone who lacks. You're someone who has enough and more than enough. And that identity shift is what creates lasting wealth. The Jewish tradition doesn't present tzedakah as optional charity for those who can afford it. It's presented as an obligation, a fundamental law of prosperity that applies whether you're rich or poor. In fact, the Talmud teaches that even someone who receives charity must also give charity, even if it's a tiny amount. Why? Because the act of giving is what maintains abundance consciousness. The person who only receives begins to identify as needy, as less than, as someone who depends on others. But the person who gives, no matter how little they have, maintains their identity as a provider, as abundant, as someone who has something valuable to offer. That identity is everything. Modern neuroscience explains why this works. Your brain has mirror neurons that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing it. But here's what's fascinating. Your brain also can't distinguish between giving and receiving at the neurological level. When you give money, the same reward centers light up as when you receive money. But there's a difference in the emotional signature. Receiving often comes with a slight anxiety about keeping it or fear of losing it. Giving, especially when done joyfully, creates pure positive emotion with no attachment or fear. That pure positive emotion is what programs your subconscious for abundance, without the contamination of scarcity thinking. Think about how wealthy people behave. They're generous, often extravagantly so. They tip well, they donate to causes, they invest in people and projects, they give gifts freely. And most people think, of course they're generous. They can afford to be. But that's backwards. They're not generous because they're wealthy. They're wealthy because they've always been generous. The generosity came first. The consciousness of abundance that allows free giving is what created the wealth. The money is just the physical manifestation of a consciousness that was already operating from overflow. There's also a principle in physics that explains why tzedakah works. The law of circulation. Energy must move to grow. Water that doesn't flow becomes stagnant. Blood that doesn't circulate causes death. Money that doesn't move cannot multiply. When you hoard money, when you refuse to let it flow out, you're actually stopping the flow that would bring more in. It's like trying to breathe in without ever breathing out. You can't receive new breath if you don't release the old breath. The same is true for money and every other form of energy. The Jewish practice of tzedakah creates a constant circulation. Money flows in, 10% immediately flows out, and that outflow creates a vacuum that pulls more in. It's not mystical, it's physics. Nature abhors a vacuum. When you create space by giving, that space demands to be filled. But if you're clutching everything tightly, there's no space for new abundance to enter. You're signaling, I'm full, I don't need more, I'm holding on to every bit I have. And the universe respects that signal by not sending you more. Why would it? You're clearly not ready to receive it. Here's another layer to this that's absolutely crucial. In Jewish tradition, tzedakah is given before you calculate your needs. This is critical. You don't figure out your expenses and then give from what's left over. You give first, and then you trust that your needs will be met from the remaining 90%. This practice does something profound to your psychology. It forces you to trust. It forces you to live as if you're supported by something larger than your own calculation. It forces you to step out of the control mindset that comes from fear and into the flow mindset that comes from faith. When you pay yourself first in the spiritual sense by giving first, you're telling your subconscious that your needs are already met. You're acting as if abundance is so certain that you can afford to be generous before you've even secured your survival. This might sound reckless, but it's actually the most sophisticated wealth programming available. Your subconscious doesn't respond to what you say you believe. It responds to what you do. And when you consistently give first, your subconscious has no choice but to conclude that you must be abundant. It starts producing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that match that conclusion. I've seen this principle work in hundreds of lives, including my own. When I first learned about tzedakah, I was struggling financially. I had debt. I was anxious about money constantly, and giving away 10% seemed impossible. But I decided to test it. I started giving 10% of everything that came in. And I mean everything. Not just my salary, but that $20 my aunt sent for my birthday. That refund check from overpaying a bill, every single inflow. At first it was terrifying, but something strange happened. My income started increasing. Not immediately, not dramatically, but consistently. Opportunities appeared. Projects materialized. Within a year, I was making more than I ever had. And the 10% I was giving was larger than my entire income used to be. But more important than the money increase was the consciousness shift. I stopped feeling anxious about money. I stopped checking my bank account obsessively. I stopped that awful clutching feeling in my chest when bills arrived. I felt wealthy even before the numbers in my account reflected it. And that feeling of wealth is what attracted more wealth. The giving didn't cause the money to appear through some magical transaction with the universe. The giving changed me. It changed my vibration, my confidence, my expectation, my willingness to take risks, my ability to spot opportunity, and that changed everything. Now let's talk about how to give for maximum consciousness impact. The Jewish tradition is very specific about this. You don't give to show off, or to feel superior, or to create obligation. You give with joy, with a sense of privilege that you have something to share, and ideally in a way that preserves the dignity of the recipient. The highest form of tzedakah is giving in a way where neither the giver nor the receiver knows the other's identity. Why? Because that removes ego from the equation completely. You're not giving to look good, to feel good about yourself, or to gain social status. You're giving purely to participate in the circulation of abundance. When you give with pure intention, something magical happens in your energy field. Your heart generates a coherent electromagnetic signature that broadcasts abundance, generosity, overflow. This field is what the quantum realm responds to. Remember, the quantum field is pure potential, and it collapses into specific realities based on the observer's consciousness. When your consciousness is broadcasting, "I have more than enough to share," the quantum field hears that as an instruction and begins collapsing possibilities that match that frequency. Opportunities that resonate with abundance consciousness start showing up in your experience. But if you give from obligation, resentment, or to manipulate an outcome, your energy field is incoherent. You're mixing the frequency of giving with the frequency of fear or control, and that mixed signal produces mixed results at best. This is why so many people try giving and say, "I gave, and nothing changed." They gave from the wrong consciousness. They gave while internally resenting it, or while desperately trying to make the universe give them something back. That's not giving. That's attempted manipulation. And the quantum field doesn't respond to manipulation. It responds to genuine energetic signatures. So when you practice tzedakah, give with genuine joy. Imagine you're a millionaire who's thrilled to make a difference. Feel the pleasure of knowing your money will help someone. Feel grateful that you have something to share. Connect with the person or cause receiving your gift, and genuinely wish them well. This emotional component is what activates the full power of the practice. You're not just moving money. You're generating an energetic field of abundance that restructures your entire relationship with wealth. And here's something beautiful that happens as you continue this practice. You start to see opportunities to give everywhere. Not just money, but your time, your knowledge, your encouragement, your attention. You become someone who looks for ways to add value rather than extract it. And people who add value become magnetic. Everyone wants to be around them, work with them, hire them, promote them. They become natural centers of prosperity because they've trained themselves to think in terms of contribution rather than acquisition. The wealth they create is a natural byproduct of the value they've conditioned themselves to provide. There's a Jewish story about a wealthy merchant who was asked how he became so rich. He said, "I'll tell you my secret. When I was young and had very little, I decided that whatever I earned, I would immediately give 10% to those in need. When I earned $10, I gave $1. When I earned 100, I gave 10. When I earned 1,000, I gave 100. And I kept doing this as my income grew. Now I earn 1,000,000, and I give 100,000. And I believe God saw my faithfulness when I had little and said, "This person knows how to handle money. Let me give them more to steward." Whether you attribute this to God, the universe, or your own subconscious programming doesn't matter. The principle remains the same. Prove yourself faithful in little, and you'll be entrusted with much. This is the test that most people fail. They say, "I'll be generous when I'm rich." But they're not generous when they're poor, so they never become rich. They're waiting for wealth to give them a generous consciousness. But it works the other way around. A generous consciousness gives you wealth. You have to become the person who would naturally be wealthy before wealth can show up in your experience. And one of the fastest ways to become that person is to act like that person would act. Wealthy people give freely. So give freely now, even when it's difficult, and you're installing wealthy person consciousness in your subconscious mind. I want you to understand something critical here. This practice is not about bribing God or the universe. It's not about trying to make a deal where you give $10 and expect 100 back. That mindset completely misses the point and actually sabotages the process. Tzedakah is about changing you. It's about breaking the grip that scarcity has on your consciousness. It's about proving to your subconscious that you trust abundance. It's about creating circulation instead of stagnation. It's about aligning your actions with the identity of someone who has plenty. The return on this investment isn't guaranteed in the form of exact dollars returning to you. The return is guaranteed in the form of consciousness transformation. And consciousness transformation always produces changes in your physical circumstances. It might come as a raise, a new opportunity, an unexpected windfall, a brilliant idea, a door opening, a problem resolving, or a resource appearing. You don't get to control how it manifests. You just get to trust that when you shift your consciousness, your reality must shift to match. So here's your practice, starting right now. Decide on a percentage that feels significant, but not impossible. If 10% is too much, start with 5%, or even 3%. The important thing is that it's enough to be uncomfortable, enough to trigger your scarcity programming, so you can override it. Then commit to giving that percentage of every single dollar that comes to you before you spend it on anything else. Before rent, before food, before entertainment, before saving first. And give it with joy, imagining you're already the wealthy person you're becoming, delighted to share your abundance. As you lie here tonight, drifting towards sleep, imagine what it would feel like to have so much abundance that giving away thousands or even millions of dollars felt easy and natural. Imagine the peace, the confidence, the generosity that would flow through you. Feel that in your body right now. Let that feeling saturate your cells, your nervous system, your subconscious mind. Because that feeling is the consciousness that creates wealth. And every time you give, especially when it's uncomfortable, you're stepping into that consciousness. You're becoming that person, and that person is magnetic to the wealth you desire. This is the paradox of tzedakah. You give to receive, not because there's a transactional exchange, but because giving transforms you into someone who naturally receives. You release to attract. You circulate to multiply. You prove abundance to experience abundance. And the Jewish people have known this secret for thousands of years. Now it's yours to practice, yours to embody, and yours to live into the wealth that's waiting for the version of you who knows how to give freely. Chapter 4, Chutzpah, the sacred audacity of the prosperous. There's a Yiddish word that has no perfect translation in English, but it captures one of the most powerful traits of prosperity consciousness. Chutzpah. It's often defined as audacity, nerve, or bold confidence, but that doesn't capture the full meaning. Chutzpah is the quality that allows you to ask for what you want without apology, to negotiate fearlessly, to pursue opportunities that others consider out of reach, to believe in yourself even when no one else does, and to act as if success is your birthright rather than a lucky accident you hope might happen. It's the opposite of playing small. It's the antidote to the imposter syndrome that keeps brilliant people trapped in mediocrity. And it's one of the defining characteristics of Jewish prosperity consciousness. Let me tell you what chutzpah looks like in action. It's the immigrant who arrives in a new country with nothing, and within a generation builds an empire. It's the entrepreneur who walks into a bank and asks for $1 million loan based purely on the strength of their vision. It's the employee who negotiates a salary double what was offered because they know their value. It's the artist who prices their work at premium rates while unknown creators undersell themselves. It's the student who emails a billionaire mentor asking for guidance and actually expects a response. Chutzpah is acting from the consciousness of someone who deserves extraordinary things, even before the external evidence supports that belief. Now, before you think this is about arrogance or entitlement, let me clarify something crucial. Chutzpah is not arrogant. Arrogance comes from insecurity and needs to prove itself superior to others. Chutzpah comes from a deep knowing of your intrinsic worth and doesn't need to diminish anyone else. Arrogance is fragile and defensive. Chutzpah is secure and expansive. Arrogance says, I'm better than you. Chutzpah says, I'm valuable, and so are you, and there's enough success for all of us. This distinction is everything, because true chutzpah, the kind that creates lasting wealth, is always coupled with humility, generosity, and genuine respect for others. The Jewish tradition actually teaches a form of chutzpah that's explicitly spiritual. There are stories throughout Jewish texts of people arguing with God, negotiating with the divine, challenging heavenly decrees. Abraham famously bargained with God to save Sodom. Moses repeatedly questioned and pushed back on God's plans. Job demanded answers for his suffering. This wasn't considered disrespectful. It was considered the mark of a deep relationship. The ability to bring your full self, your questions, your demands, your audacity into dialogue with the infinite. And this same quality translates directly into how Jewish culture approaches business, opportunity, and wealth creation. Think about what happens in most people's consciousness when they want something significant. They immediately start listing all the reasons why they can't have it, why they don't deserve it, why it's impossible, why they're not qualified, why the timing is wrong. Their inner voice says, who am I to want this? Who am I to ask for this? I should be grateful for what I have. I should be realistic. I should wait until I'm more prepared, more credentialed, more proven. This voice is not wisdom. It's programming. It's the voice of scarcity consciousness, disguised as humility. And it's the single biggest obstacle between you and the wealth you desire. Chutzpah is the quality that overrides that voice. It's the part of you that says, why not me? Why not now? I may not have all the qualifications on paper, but I have value to offer. I may not see the entire path, but I can see the next step. I may not have evidence that this will work, but I have the audacity to try anyway. This isn't delusional thinking. It's the consciousness of every person who's ever achieved anything significant. No one who waited until they felt fully ready ever did anything remarkable. Remarkable achievements require stepping into a bigger version of yourself before you feel ready. That step requires chutzpah. Let me share a story about a woman named Sarah who came to understand this principle in the most dramatic way. Sarah was brilliant, accomplished, and completely trapped by her own politeness. She'd been working for the same company for 12 years, consistently delivering exceptional results, but she'd never asked for a significant raise or promotion. She waited to be noticed, to be rewarded, to be given what she deserved. When I asked her why she didn't advocate for herself, she said, "I don't want to seem pushy or entitled. I want my work to speak for itself." And there it was, the anti-chutzpah that was costing her hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of her career. I challenged Sarah to do something that terrified her. I told her to request a meeting with the CEO, not her direct manager, but the CEO, and to walk in with a proposal for a new role she would create, complete with a salary requirement that was 50% higher than her current pay. She looked at me like I'd asked her to jump off a building. "I can't do that," she said. "I'll look arrogant. They'll think I'm overvaluing myself. What if they fire me?" And I said, "Sarah, you've been undervaluing yourself for 12 years. You've been invisible for 12 years. The worst they can say is no, and you'll be exactly where you are now. But if you don't ask, you've already told yourself no. And that's the most expensive decision you'll ever make." It took Sarah 3 weeks to gather the courage, but she did it. She walked into the CEO's office with her proposal, her hands shaking, her voice wavering at first, but getting stronger as she spoke. She laid out the value she'd created, the vision she had for a new division, and the compensation that matched her contribution. And you know what happened. The CEO listened, asked questions, and within 2 weeks offered her exactly what she'd asked for. Not because the company suddenly recognized her value, they'd always known her value, but because she finally recognized it herself and had the chutzpah to claim it. Here's what Sarah learned, and what you need to understand. People treat you the way you treat yourself. If you act as if you're worth premium compensation, premium opportunities, and premium treatment, others will perceive you that way. If you act as if you should be grateful for scraps, that's what you'll receive. Your external value in the marketplace is almost entirely determined by your internal sense of worth, combined with your willingness to advocate for it. That combination is chutzpah. The neuroscience behind this is fascinating. When you act with confidence, even before you feel confident, your brain releases testosterone and reduces cortisol. This hormonal shift makes you think more clearly, take better risks, and appear more capable to others. It's a feedback loop. Bold action creates confident biology, which creates confident behavior, which creates successful outcomes, which reinforces the bold action. But someone has to start the loop, and that requires chutzpah, the willingness to act as if you're already the successful person you're becoming. There's a concept in Jewish business culture that perfectly embodies this principle. It's the idea that you should sell the bear skin before you hunt the bear. In other words, have the audacity to commit to results before you know exactly how you'll deliver them. Pitch the project before you've figured out all the details. Promise the outcome before you've solved every problem. Sign the client before you've built the full team. This sounds reckless to people with scarcity consciousness, but it's actually how every significant achievement happens. You commit first, and then you figure out how. The commitment activates resources, creativity, and solutions that weren't visible before you took the leap. I've watched this principle work in my own life countless times. Every major opportunity I've received came from having the chutzpah to say yes to something before I knew how I'd deliver it. Speaking engagements in countries I'd never visited, workshops for audiences I'd never served, projects requiring skills I hadn't fully developed. Each time, My logical mind screamed, "You're not ready. You'll fail. People will see you're a fraud." But my chutzpah said, "I'll figure it out. I always do. And even if I stumble, I'll learn something valuable." And you know what? I always did figure it out. The commitment activated my creativity. The pressure accelerated my growth. The audacity opened doors that careful caution would have kept closed forever. This is how wealth is created, not by waiting until you're perfectly prepared, perfectly credentialed, perfectly positioned. Wealth is created by people who have the audacity to pursue opportunities before they're ready, to ask for compensation beyond their current market value, to start businesses before they have all the answers, to invest before they're experts, to act as if success is inevitable, even when fear says it's impossible. That quality, that sacred audacity, is what separates people who dream about wealth from people who create it. Now let's talk about the spiritual dimension of chutzpah, because this is where it becomes truly powerful. In Jewish mysticism, there's a teaching that you are a partner with the divine in creation, not a servant waiting for orders, not a child hoping for approval, a partner, an equal collaborator in the ongoing work of bringing potential into reality. This is a radically different relationship than most religious traditions teach, and it produces a radically different psychology. If you're a partner with the infinite creative force of the universe, then you have not just permission, but obligation to show up boldly, to make big asks, to pursue ambitious visions. This consciousness eliminates the false humility that keeps people small. False humility says, "Who am I to want great things? I should be content with less. I should not desire more than I currently have." But that's not humility. That's fear dressed up as virtue. True humility says, "I'm a unique expression of infinite potential, and it would be arrogant for me to play small when I'm capable of creating value on a large scale. It would be disrespectful to the gifts I've been given to hide them under a bushel. The most humble thing I can do is use my abilities fully, even if that makes me visible, even if that makes me wealthy, even if that makes others uncomfortable." This reframe is absolutely critical for wealth creation. Most people have been programmed to believe that wanting wealth is greedy, that pursuing success is selfish, that standing out is prideful. These beliefs create unconscious self-sabotage. Even when opportunities appear, even when success is within reach, something in you pulls back, dims your light, undermines your efforts. Why? Because your subconscious believes that being too successful would make you a bad person. That belief is poison to prosperity. Chutzpah is the antidote. It gives you permission to pursue wealth, not despite your values, but because of them. Wealth increases your ability to contribute, to help, to create change. Wealth is a tool, and tools should be in the hands of people who will use them well. Let me address a fear that might be coming up for you. If I act with chutzpah, won't people think I'm arrogant? Won't I alienate others? Won't I be rejected? Here's the truth. Some people will be uncomfortable with your boldness. Some people will judge you, criticize you, try to pull you back down. But those are not your people. Those are people trapped in their own scarcity consciousness, and they need you to stay small so they can feel okay about staying small themselves. Your job is not to make them comfortable. Your job is to become the fullest expression of your potential. And the people who are meant to be part of your journey, the clients, partners, mentors, and opportunities that match your frequency, will be attracted to your confidence, not repelled by it. Think about the people you most admire, the leaders you respect, the innovators you follow. Are they tentative and apologetic, or do they move through the world with conviction, claiming space, making bold declarations, pursuing ambitious visions? You're attracted to their certainty, their confidence, their audacity. That's chutzpah, and that's what makes them magnetic. You have that same quality available within you. The only question is whether you'll give yourself permission to express it. Here's a practice that will begin activating your chutzpah right now. Think of something you want: a raise, a new client, an investment, a partnership, an opportunity, something specific where you've been holding back, playing small, or waiting to be chosen. Now I want you to imagine you're already the person who has achieved that thing. Feel into that future self. How do they carry themselves? How do they speak? What's their energy like? Do they apologize for wanting this? Do they question their worth? Or do they simply expect success as their natural state? Sit with that version of yourself. Feel their confidence in your body. Notice how their shoulders sit, how they breathe, how they walk into room. Now here's the powerful part. Act from that place tomorrow. When you wake up, embody that person. Speak like they speak. Move like they move. Ask for things like they would ask. Make the call you've been avoiding. Send the email you've been overthinking. Have the conversation you've been postponing. Not from your current identity of someone who hopes it might work out. From the identity of someone who expects it to work out. This is not fake it till you make it. This is stepping into the consciousness that creates the result before the result exists in physical form. This is how manifestation actually works. The quantum field responds to who you're being, not who you've been. Every moment is a choice point where you can collapse into the old familiar pattern of playing small, or you can leap into a new pattern of bold claiming. The past does not have to determine the future unless you allow it to. Your history of holding back, of doubting yourself, of waiting for permission, of minimizing your asks, none of that has to continue unless you recreate it through continued, timid action. But if you act with chutzpah right now, this moment, you interrupt that pattern. You create a new neural pathway. You signal to your subconscious that things are different now. And here's what will happen. At first, it will feel uncomfortable, even fake. Your old identity will protest loudly. Your fear will amplify. You'll want to retreat back to the familiar safety of being small. This is normal. This is the resistance that every person faces when they expand beyond their current programming. The Jewish people faced this resistance every time they were forced to start over, every time they entered a new market, every time they had to claim space in a culture that didn't welcome them. They could have played small, stayed invisible, accepted limited opportunities, but they had chutzpah. They claimed space anyway. They negotiated anyway. They built anyway. And their audacity created prosperity that defied every logical prediction. You have that same capacity, not because you're special or different, but because you're human, and chutzpah is part of the human design. It's been suppressed in you by a culture that rewards conformity, by an education system that punishes standing out, by family programming that confused humility with smallness. But it's still there, waiting to be activated. Every time you've ever done something brave, every time you've spoken up, when it was easier to stay silent, every time you've pursued something despite fear, you were accessing your chutzpah. Now it's time to make it your default mode, rather than your occasional exception. Let me give you a specific example of how to practice chutzpah in negotiation, because this is where most people lose hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. When someone makes you an offer, for a salary, for a project, for a purchase, your programming probably tells you to accept it gratefully or to ask for just slightly more than offered. But chutzpah says, pause, recognize your value, and make a counter-offer that reflects your true worth, not your fear of rejection. If they offer $60,000, you say $85,000. If they offer $10 an hour, you say $17. If they offer 5,000 for the project, you say 12,000, not as a negotiation tactic, but as a genuine statement of your value. What's the worst that happens? They say no, and you're exactly where you were before you asked. But what's the best that happens? They say yes, and you just increased your income significantly with a single conversation. And what's most likely to happen? They meet you somewhere in the middle, which is still far better than accepting their first offer. But here's what definitely happens. You rewire your brain to believe you're worth more. You activate your chutzpah. You signal to your subconscious that you're someone who advocates for their value, and that signal is worth more than any single negotiation, because that signal changes your identity, and your identity determines your long-term wealth. The Jewish Prosperity Code includes chutzpah as a non-negotiable element because wealth creation requires bold action. It requires asking when others stay silent. It requires claiming when others wait to be given. It requires pursuing when others hesitate. It requires believing in yourself before others believe in you. These aren't optional nice-to-haves for exceptional people. These are requirements for anyone who wants to escape the gravitational pull of financial mediocrity. You don't need to be extraordinary to have chutzpah. You just need to be willing to act as if you're worthy before the evidence confirms it. So as you rest here tonight, let this truth settle into your subconscious. You are worthy of extraordinary success. You are capable of achieving things that currently seem impossible. You have value that deserves premium compensation. You have gifts that deserve wide distribution. You have a voice that deserves to be heard. And you have permission, no obligation, to pursue your biggest vision with sacred audacity. This isn't arrogance. This is alignment with your true nature as a creative force in the universe. This is you finally giving yourself permission to play at the level you were designed for. This is chutzpah, and it's about to change everything. Chapter 5. Shabbat, the weekly portal of recalibration. What if I told you that one of the most powerful wealth creation strategies ever discovered involves doing absolutely nothing for 24 hours every week? That the secret to accelerating your prosperity isn't working harder, hustling more, or grinding yourself into exhaustion, but rather stepping completely away from all productive activity on a regular, sacred schedule. This contradicts everything our culture teaches about success. We're told that wealth comes from constant effort, that rest is something you earn after you've made it, that stopping means falling behind. But the Jewish practice of Shabbat, a complete cessation of work from Friday evening to Saturday evening, reveals a profound truth about how manifestation actually works in the quantum field. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is nothing at all. Let me explain what Shabbat actually is, because most people misunderstand it completely. It's not just a day off. It's not a break to recover so you can work harder next week. It's not a reward for good behavior. Shabbat is a weekly reset of your entire consciousness, a deliberate interruption of the doing mode that keeps you trapped in linear thinking, and a portal into the quantum field where infinite possibilities exist. For 24 hours, you stop trying to make things happen. You stop checking email, making business calls, working on projects, planning, strategizing, or doing anything that constitutes work in the productive sense. You simply exist in a state of being, of presence, of celebration, of rest so complete that it reprograms your nervous system at the deepest level. The neuroscience behind this practice is absolutely remarkable. When you're constantly in doing mode, working, planning, solving problems, pushing forward, your brain operates primarily in beta wave frequencies. Beta waves are associated with active thinking, problem solving, and external focus. They're necessary for getting things done, but when they dominate your consciousness, they actually limit your creativity, intuition, and ability to perceive new possibilities. Your brain becomes so focused on executing the known that it cannot access the unknown. You're running on autopilot, repeating familiar patterns, creating predictable results. This is why people can work incredibly hard for years without significant breakthrough. They're working from the same consciousness that created their current circumstances, so they keep recreating those same circumstances with minor variations. But when you completely stop working for an entire day, something extraordinary happens in your brain. You shift from beta waves into alpha and theta wave states. These are the frequencies associated with creativity, insight, intuition, and connection to the quantum field. In alpha and theta states, your prefrontal cortex, the seat of conscious control, quiets down, and your subconscious mind becomes more accessible. This is the state where solutions appear out of nowhere, where you suddenly see connections you'd missed, where innovative ideas emerge without effort. This is the state where manifestation accelerates because you're no longer forcing outcomes from limited consciousness. You're allowing infinite intelligence to work through you. Think about when your best ideas have come to you. I'm willing to bet they didn't come while you were straining at your desk, forcing yourself to figure things out. They came in the shower, on a walk, just before sleep, or first thing in the morning, times when your conscious mind relaxed its grip and your deeper intelligence could surface. Shabbat institutionalizes this process. It guarantees that once a week, every week, you'll enter the state where breakthroughs happen. It's not optional, it's not dependent on your mood or your schedule, and it's not something you do if you have time. It's a non-negotiable practice that creates the space for quantum leaps. Let me share a story about Michael, an entrepreneur who was working himself to death. Literally. He was putting in 80-hour weeks, sleeping 4 hours a night, constantly stressed, and despite all this effort, his business was stagnant. He came to me burned out, desperate, and convinced that if he could just work a little harder, push a little more, sacrifice a little more sleep, he'd finally break through. I looked at him and said, "Michael, your problem isn't that you're not working hard enough. Your problem is that you never stop working, so you're creating from the same exhausted, limited consciousness every single day. You need to practice Shabbat." He thought I was insane. "I can't take a full day off," he said. "I'll fall behind. My competitors will get ahead. Opportunities will pass me by." But Michael was desperate enough to try. He committed to a complete work stop-off from Friday evening to Saturday evening. No email, no phone calls, no planning, no thinking about business. Just rest, time with family, good food, and complete presence. The first week was torture. He was anxious, restless, convinced he was making a terrible mistake. But by the fourth week, something shifted. He came back from Shabbat with clarity he hadn't had in years. He saw that half of what he'd been working on was busy work that produced no real value. He had an insight about restructuring his entire business model. He felt energized instead of depleted. Within 3 months of practicing Shabbat consistently, Michael's business revenue doubled, not because he was working more. He was actually working less. But the work he was doing came from a completely different consciousness. He was working from inspiration rather than desperation, from clarity rather than confusion, from trust rather than fear. His clients noticed the difference in his energy. His team responded to his renewed leadership. Opportunities appeared that he would have missed in his previous state of exhausted tunnel vision. The rest wasn't making him fall behind. It was catapulting him forward. Here's the quantum physics of why Shabbat works. The quantum field is the invisible realm of pure potential, where all possibilities exist simultaneously. Every outcome you could possibly want already exists in this field as a potential reality. But which potential collapses into your actual physical experience depends on your consciousness, specifically on your vibrational frequency and your ability to receive. When you're constantly in doing mode, you're broadcasting the frequency of, "I have to make this happen through my effort." That frequency actually pushes abundance away because it's rooted in the belief that you're separate from the source of supply, that you have to work hard to overcome scarcity. But when you practice Shabbat, when you completely release the need to make things happen and simply rest in trust, you're broadcasting a completely different frequency. You're saying to the quantum field, "I trust that I'm supported. I trust that the universe is working on my behalf, even when I'm not working. I trust that abundance flows to me, not just through my effort." This frequency of trust and sufficiency is magnetic to wealth. It opens you to receive in ways that striving blocks. It allows the universe to surprise you with opportunities, connections, and resources that your limited human planning could never orchestrate. There's a principle in manifestation that most people misunderstand. You cannot create from lack. If you're working from the consciousness of, "I don't have enough, I need to make more, I have to keep pushing or I'll fail," you're creating from lack, and lack creates more lack. It doesn't matter how hard you work. If the energy behind your work is fear and desperation, you'll keep creating circumstances that match that frequency. But when you can stop working and genuinely rest, you're demonstrating to yourself and to the quantum field that you already have enough, that you trust abundance, that you're not in survival mode, and that consciousness is what opens the floodgates of prosperity. The Jewish tradition understood this so deeply that they made Shabbat one of the 10 Commandments, not as a suggestion, not as optional self-care, but as a fundamental law of reality. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Why? Because stopping is sacred. Rest is not laziness. It's alignment with how creation actually works. Even God, according to the creation story, rested on the 7th day, not because God was tired, but to establish the rhythm of creation and rest, of doing and being, of manifestation and integration. You create for 6 days, and on the 7th day you stop creating and simply enjoy what you've created. This rhythm is built into the fabric of reality itself. Modern productivity culture has completely lost this wisdom. We glorify the hustle, celebrate the grind, worship at the altar of constant action. We wear our exhaustion as a badge of honor. We brag about how little we sleep, how busy we are, how we never take breaks. And then we wonder why we're stressed, sick, unfulfilled, and stuck in cycles of diminishing return. We're trying to override a fundamental law of consciousness, and it's not working. You cannot force your way to wealth through sheer effort. Eventually, you hit a ceiling that only rest can break through. Let me tell you what happens in your body during Shabbat, because this is crucial to understanding its power. When you're constantly stressed and working, your sympathetic nervous system is dominant. This is your fight-or-flight response, designed for short-term survival situations. It floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline, which shuts down non-essential functions like digestion, immune response, and cellular repair. In this state, your body is literally breaking down faster than it's building up. Your aging accelerated. Your cells cannot regenerate properly. Your brain cannot consolidate learning or clear toxins. You're running your biology into the ground. But when you practice Shabbat, when you completely stop and rest, your parasympathetic nervous system activates. This is your rest and digest mode, where healing happens, where your immune system strengthens, where your cells repair and regenerate, where your brain processes and integrates information. In this state, you're building up faster than you're breaking down. You're literally becoming younger, healthier, and more coherent. And this physical coherence directly affects your ability to manifest wealth. A coherent body generates a coherent electromagnetic field, and a coherent field is what attracts coherent circumstances, including financial abundance. There's also a profound psychological benefit to Shabbat that most people miss. When you can completely stop working without guilt, without anxiety, without feeling like you're falling behind, you're proving to yourself that your worth is not tied to your productivity. This is revolutionary for most people. We've been so conditioned to believe that our value comes from what we do, from how much we accomplish, from our usefulness to others. This belief creates an identity that's fundamentally insecure because you're only as valuable as your last achievement. You can never rest, because resting would mean you're worthless. Shabbat breaks this toxic pattern. It declares that you have inherent worth simply by existing, regardless of what you produce. You're valuable on Shabbat even though you're not working, not producing, not accomplishing anything. This weekly practice of being, instead of doing, reprograms your subconscious to understand that you don't have to earn your existence. You're already worthy. You're already enough. And paradoxically, this is exactly the consciousness that allows you to create wealth easily. When you're not trying to prove your worth through constant achievement, you can create from a place of playful exploration rather than desperate necessity. You can take inspired action rather than frantic action. You can receive opportunities rather than chasing them. Now let's talk about the practical structure of Shabbat, because the details matter. It's not just any day off. It's the same day every week, creating a rhythm your nervous system can anticipate and prepare for. In Jewish tradition, it's Friday evening to Saturday evening, roughly 25 hours. The timing isn't arbitrary. There's something powerful about having a fixed schedule that your entire life revolves around. It means you can't postpone it when things get busy. You can't skip it because you have too much to do. The world has to wait, and you have to trust that everything will still be okay without your constant intervention. The preparation for Shabbat is also significant. Before it begins, you prepare everything you'll need. Food is cooked, the house is cleaned, work is completed or paused. This preparation is part of the practice because it teaches you to work with urgency and focus when you're working, knowing that a deadline is coming. Most people waste enormous amounts of time because they have infinite time to work. They procrastinate, get distracted, work inefficiently because there's always more time available. But when you know you have to stop at a specific time, you become dramatically more focused and productive during your working hours. Shabbat doesn't reduce your productivity. It concentrates it. Then when Shabbat begins, you mark the transition with ritual. In Jewish tradition, you light candles, bless wine and bread, gather with family or community. The ritual isn't just ceremonial. It's a signal to your nervous system that you're shifting states. You're moving from doing to being, from striving to receiving, from work consciousness to rest consciousness. This transition is crucial because without it, most people can't actually stop. Their minds keep working even when their bodies are resting. The ritual creates a clear boundary that tells your entire system, now we rest. During Shabbat itself, the guideline is simple but profound. No work, no creating, no fixing, no improving, no building, no earning. This includes not just physical labor, but also mental work. No planning your week, no solving business problems, no worrying about money. For 24 hours, you trust that everything is okay exactly as it is. You engage in activities that nourish you. Eating beautiful food, spending time with loved ones, walking in nature, reading for pleasure, making love, sleeping, playing, celebrating. You practice being present, being grateful, being satisfied. You consciously appreciate what you already have instead of focusing on what you don't have or what you need to create. This practice of satisfaction is absolutely critical for wealth creation. Your subconscious mind cannot hold two contradictory feelings simultaneously. If you feel satisfied, you cannot feel lacking. And when you train yourself to feel genuine satisfaction for 24 hours every week, you're installing a pattern of sufficiency consciousness. You're teaching your nervous system that you already have enough, that your life is already abundant, that you're already blessed. And from that consciousness of sufficiency, you naturally attract more to be satisfied with. The universe reflects back to you the frequency you're broadcasting, and satisfaction attracts more satisfying circumstances. I want you to imagine what your life would look like with this practice fully integrated. Imagine knowing that every week you have a guaranteed day of complete rest and renewal. Imagine the peace of closing your computer Friday evening and not opening it until Sunday morning. Imagine 24 hours where no one can demand your time, your attention, your problem-solving abilities. Imagine the spaciousness, the freedom, the relief of not having to be productive. Imagine coming back to work Sunday morning, not depleted, but energized, not scattered, but focused, not stuck, but inspired. This isn't a fantasy. This is what thousands of years of Jewish practitioners have experienced. This is why many of the most successful people in history, yes, disproportionately Jewish people, have structured their lives around this rhythm. They understood something that modern culture has forgotten. Rest is not the opposite of productivity. Rest is what makes true productivity possible. You cannot create sustainably from exhaustion. You cannot access your highest intelligence from stress. You cannot manifest from desperation. You need regular, complete, sacred rest to recalibrate your consciousness to the frequency of abundance. So here's your invitation. Starting this week, choose one day to practice your version of Shabbat. It doesn't have to be Saturday. It doesn't have to include any religious elements if that's not your path. But it does need to be a complete cessation of work for at least 24 hours. Mark it on your calendar as non-negotiable. Tell everyone in your life that you'll be unavailable during this time. Prepare ahead so that everything is handled. And then, when the time comes, stop completely. Turn off your phone, close your computer, release all work-related thoughts, and just be. The first time will probably be uncomfortable. Your mind will protest. Your anxiety will spike. You'll feel guilty, restless, convinced you're making a mistake. This is normal. This is your old programming, fighting to maintain control. Let it be uncomfortable. Breathe through it. Trust the process. And notice what happens. Notice the thoughts that arise when you're not distracting yourself with constant doing. Notice the clarity that emerges when your mind gets quiet. Notice how your body feels when it's finally allowed to fully relax. Notice any insights, ideas, or intuitions that surface when you create space for them. Then do it again, next week, and the week after that. Make it a rhythm, a practice, a non-negotiable element of your life, and watch what happens to your consciousness, your creativity, your energy, and yes, your wealth. Because when you master the art of sacred rest, when you can truly stop trying to make things happen and trust that you're supported, you unlock a level of manifestation that effort alone can never access. You become a magnet for opportunities, resources, and abundance because your frequency is broadcasting trust, sufficiency, and alignment with the natural rhythm of creation. This is the secret that Shabbat has preserved for millennia. Wealth doesn't come from constant doing. It comes from the dance between doing and being, between effort and surrender, between working and trusting. And the Jewish people who've practiced this rhythm have prospered, not despite taking a full day off every week, but because of it. They've tapped into a fundamental law of consciousness that says, when you can genuinely rest in trust, the universe will move heaven and earth to support you. Now it's your turn to discover this truth for yourself. As you rest here tonight, let your body remember what it feels like to completely let go. Let your mind release its grip on all the things you think you need to control. Let yourself sink into the trust that everything is working out perfectly, that you're exactly where you need to be, that abundance is flowing to you even in this moment of complete stillness. This is the consciousness of Shabbat. This is the frequency of prosperity, and you can return to it every single week for the rest of your life. Chapter 6, Chinuch, Programming Generational Abundance. There's a reason why wealth tends to concentrate in certain families across generations, while other families remain trapped in cycles of financial struggle for decades or even centuries. It's not genetics, it's not luck, and it's not some conspiracy of the privileged. It's programming. The beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors around money that get installed in a child's subconscious before the age of 7 become the operating system that runs their financial life for decades unless deliberately reprogrammed. And the Jewish practice of Chinuch, which means education but specifically refers to the intentional transmission of values, beliefs, and practices to children, is perhaps the most powerful wealth creation technology ever developed because it installs prosperity consciousness before limiting beliefs can take root. Let me explain something crucial about how your financial programming was installed. Before you were 7 years old, your brain operated primarily in theta wave frequencies. This is the same brainwave state that adults enter during deep meditation or hypnosis. In theta state, the conscious mind's filters are minimal, and information goes directly into the subconscious without critical analysis. This is why young children are such incredible learners. They absorb everything without questioning it. They don't evaluate whether something is true or false, possible or impossible, good or bad. They just download it directly into their operating system, and whatever gets downloaded becomes their reality. So during those first 7 years, you absorbed your parents' relationship with money like a sponge, not primarily through what they said, but through what they did and felt. If your parents argued about money, you learned that money causes conflict. If they seemed stressed every time bills arrived, you learned that money brings anxiety. If they said, "We can't afford that," frequently, you learned that resources are scarce. If they treated wealthy people with resentment or suspicion, you learned that being rich makes you bad. If they seemed powerless around money, always at the mercy of circumstances, you learned that financial success is outside your control. All of this programming happened unconsciously, automatically, and it's been running your financial life ever since. Now contrast that with how Jewish families who practice Chinuch approach money education. From the earliest age, children are included in conversations about prosperity, business, and wealth creation, not as topics to be hidden or worried about, but as natural, positive aspects of life to be understood and mastered. The Shabbat table becomes a classroom where business principles are discussed, where deals are analyzed, where financial decisions are evaluated. Children hear their parents speak about money with confidence, creativity, and expectation of success. They watch their parents practice tzedakah, giving away money with joy. They see their parents negotiate, advocate for their value, pursue opportunities boldly, and all of this is happening during those critical theta state years when the subconscious is wide open. But it goes deeper than just modeling. Jewish tradition has specific practices designed to install wealth consciousness in children. One of the most powerful is the practice of giving children money, specifically to give away as tzedakah. Think about what this does psychologically. The child learns that there's someone who has money to give. They learn that money flows through them to create good in the world. They learn the pleasure of generosity before they learn the fear of scarcity. They're being programmed from the very beginning to see themselves as a conduit of abundance rather than a hoarder of limited resources. This is identity-level programming, and it's happening when the brain is most receptive. Another practice is including children in discussions about value, pricing, and negotiation. Jewish children often learn early that everything is negotiable, that price is subjective, that value is determined by perception. They learn to question prices, to ask for discounts, to negotiate deals. To many cultures, this seems rude or inappropriate for children, but what it's actually doing is installing the belief that they have agency in financial transactions, that they're not passive recipients of whatever is offered, that they can advocate for themselves and create better outcomes through skillful communication. This becomes unconscious programming that serves them for life. Let me tell you about Rebecca, who came to me confused about why she couldn't break through a certain income ceiling despite being talented and hard-working. As we explored her childhood programming, she remembered a specific moment. She was 7 years old, excited about a business idea. She wanted to sell homemade cookies to neighbors. Her mother, well-meaning but operating from scarcity consciousness, said, "That's nice, honey, but people don't want to spend money on things they can make themselves. It's better to be realistic and not get your hopes up." That one moment, that one sentence delivered during the theta programming years, installed a belief that persisted for 30 years. My ideas aren't valuable enough for people to pay for. Rebecca had been unconsciously living out that programming her entire adult life. Every time she was about to charge premium prices, that 7-year-old's voice would say, "People don't want to spend money on what you offer." Every time she was about to pitch a big project, the doubt would creep in. We worked on identifying and reprogramming that belief, and within months, Rebecca had doubled her rates and was attracting clients who happily paid them. The talent was always there. The work ethic was always there. What was missing was the programming that said, "What I offer is so valuable that people will eagerly pay premium prices for it." Now imagine if Rebecca had grown up in a household that practiced chinuch intentionally. Imagine if that cookie idea had been met with, "What a creative entrepreneurial spirit. Let's figure out how to make cookies so delicious that people will pay premium prices. Let's talk about marketing, positioning, customer service. Let's calculate costs and set prices that reflect the value you're creating." Same child, same idea, completely different programming. And that different programming would have shaped the trajectory of her entire financial life. This is why generational wealth isn't primarily about inheritance. It's about inherited consciousness. Yes, having family money helps, but plenty of people inherit wealth and lose it quickly because they don't have the consciousness to sustain it. And plenty of people inherit nothing but prosperity consciousness and build fortunes from scratch. The consciousness is more valuable than the capital because consciousness creates capital. But capital without consciousness eventually disappears. The Jewish emphasis on education is famous, but what's less understood is that this education explicitly includes financial intelligence. Children learn that pursuing wealth is not just acceptable, but admirable. They learn that becoming successful is a way of honoring their family and contributing to their community. They learn that money is a tool for creating positive change, not a source of corruption. They learn business principles through religious stories: Joseph's management of Egypt's resources during famine, King Solomon's wisdom in resolving disputes, the parable of the talents. These aren't just moral lessons. They're installing mental models for how to think about resources, value, and wealth creation. There's also a practice in many Jewish homes of discussing the week's business experiences during Shabbat dinner. Parents share what deals they made, what negotiations they handled, what challenges they faced, what they learned. This serves multiple purposes. Children learn that business is something to be proud of and discussed openly, not hidden or shameful. They learn that challenges are normal and can be overcome. They absorb vocabulary, concepts, and frameworks for thinking about commerce. They see their parents as active agents, creating their reality, rather than passive victims of circumstance. And all of this is happening in the context of a sacred, joyful family meal, which creates positive emotional associations with wealth creation. Now you might be thinking, this is all well and good, but I didn't receive this programming. My parents struggled with money. I learned scarcity, not abundance. Is it too late for me? And here's the beautiful truth. It's never too late to reprogram your subconscious. Yes, childhood programming is powerful, but your brain's neuroplasticity means you can build new neural pathways at any age. You can become your own parent and give yourself the dinut you didn't receive. You can consciously install the beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors that create wealth. It requires more deliberate effort than if you'd received this programming as a child, but it's absolutely possible. The key is understanding how subconscious programming works and using the same principles intentionally. Remember, your subconscious learns through repetition, emotion, and authority figures. As a child, your parents were your authority figures, and their repeated messages delivered with emotional content became your programming. As an adult, you become your own authority figure. When you repeatedly tell yourself wealth-supporting beliefs with genuine emotion, your subconscious accepts them as true. When you consistently take actions that demonstrate abundance consciousness, your subconscious gets the message and begins producing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that match. This is why practices like the 100 daily blessings, tzedakah, and Shabbat are so powerful. They're reprogramming tools. Every time you acknowledge abundance despite circumstances, you're overwriting scarcity programming. Every time you give money with joy before you feel you can afford to, you're installing generosity consciousness. Every time you rest in trust instead of frantic doing, you're replacing anxiety with faith. You're doing for yourself what chinuch does for children, but you're doing it consciously, deliberately, as an adult who understands the process. And here's something crucial. If you have children or plan to, you now have the opportunity to break the cycle. You can be the generation that shifts from scarcity consciousness to abundance consciousness in your family line. You can practice chinuch intentionally, giving your children the financial programming that will serve them for life. This doesn't mean spoiling them or teaching them to be materialistic. It means modeling healthy relationship with money, speaking about wealth positively, including them in age-appropriate discussions about finances, teaching them to give generously, encouraging their entrepreneurial ideas, and helping them develop confidence in their ability to create value and attract abundance. Let me give you specific practices you can implement immediately, whether you're reprogramming yourself or consciously programming children. First, change the language around money in your environment. Eliminate phrases like, We can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people are greedy. Or money is the root of all evil. Replace them with, how can we afford that? Money flows to me easily. Wealthy people create value. And money is a tool for good. Your subconscious is always listening, and language shapes reality. Second, make financial discussions normal and positive. Talk about your financial goals, your income growth, your investment strategies. If you have children, include them in age-appropriate conversations. Let them see you managing money confidently. Let them hear you speak about business opportunities with excitement. Let them watch you negotiate, ask for raises, pitch projects. You're modeling that financial success is achievable, that money is manageable, that wealth creation is within your control. Third, implement family practices around giving. Whether you have children or you're doing this for yourself, create a ritual of setting aside money for tzedakah, choosing where it goes, and giving it with joy and intention. Make this a regular practice, not an occasional impulse. You're programming the consciousness of circulation, generosity, and abundance. If you have children, let them participate in deciding where money goes and delivering it. This gives them agency and positive association with financial power. Fourth, celebrate financial wins openly. In many families, money is discussed only when there's a problem. Bills can't be paid. Unexpected expenses arise. Someone loses a job. This creates the association that money equals stress. Break this pattern. When money comes in, when a deal closes, when you get a raise, when an investment pays off, celebrate it. Mark it. Feel the joy of it. Let it be positive reinforcement. If you have children, let them see your joy and confidence. You're teaching them that wealth is something to celebrate, not something to be anxious about. Fifth, teach the principle that there's always a way. When a financial challenge arises, don't immediately go to "we can't" or "it's impossible." Model creative problem solving. Say, "This is challenging, and we'll figure it out. Let's think of solutions." Brainstorm ideas. Show that obstacles can be overcome, that resourcefulness matters more than resources, that your mind is the most powerful wealth creation tool you have. This installs resilience and creative confidence instead of helplessness and victimhood. Sixth, expose yourself and your children to stories of people who created wealth from nothing. Read biographies of entrepreneurs, inventors, and innovators. Many of them came from nothing and built everything. Let these stories program your subconscious with possibility instead of limitation. Let them prove that circumstances don't determine destiny, that consciousness does. The Jewish people have countless such stories. People who lost everything and rebuilt. Immigrants who arrived with nothing and prospered. Generations who faced adversity and transcended it. These aren't just inspiring tales. They're programming tools that install the belief that you too can create wealth regardless of current circumstances. The practice of chinuch recognizes something profound. Prosperity consciousness must be cultivated deliberately because the default programming most of us receive is scarcity consciousness. Our culture, our education system, our media, most of it programs limitation, fear, and financial anxiety. Breaking free from this requires intentional reprogramming, and the earlier this reprogramming begins, the more effortless wealth creation becomes. But whenever you begin, whether you're reprogramming yourself at 40 or programming your children at 4, you're engaging in the most important investment you'll ever make. Because consciousness is the seed that produces every tree of prosperity in your life. As you rest here tonight, I want you to imagine speaking to your 7-year-old self, that child who absorbed all the programming about money, who internalized all the beliefs that have shaped your financial reality. Imagine looking at that child with love and compassion and telling them new truths. You are inherently valuable. Wealth is your birthright. Money flows to you easily. You create value that people eagerly pay for. You're smart with money. You deserve abundance. The world is full of opportunity. You're supported by infinite resources. You have everything you need to prosper. Say these things with authority, with emotion, with absolute conviction, because you are that authority figure now. You are the parent who can give yourself the programming you need. And if you have children, imagine them absorbing these same truths from you. Imagine them growing up with unshakable confidence in their ability to create wealth. Imagine them free from the scarcity programming that limited you. Imagine them stepping into adulthood with prosperity consciousness as their default operating system. This is possible. This is the gift of Chinook. This is how you break generational patterns and create generational wealth, not just in terms of money passed down, but in terms of consciousness transmitted that enables each generation to create their own abundance. This is your opportunity to become the generation that changes everything for your family line, the generation that shifts from scarcity to abundance, from limitation to possibility, from financial anxiety to financial confidence. It starts with you reprogramming yourself, and it extends through you, programming the next generation. This is Chinuch. This is how prosperity consciousness becomes generational, and it begins right now, in this moment, with your decision to install new beliefs, practice new behaviors, and create new patterns that will serve you and those who come after you for generations to come. Chapter 7. Tikkun Olam. Purpose as fuel for prosperity. What if I told you that the fastest way to multiply your wealth is to connect it to something bigger than yourself? That the most prosperous people aren't those who pursue money for its own sake, but those who pursue a purpose so compelling that money becomes a natural byproduct. This is the principle of Tikkun Olam, which literally translates to repairing the world. In Jewish tradition, it's the concept that every person has a responsibility to contribute to healing, improving, and elevating the world around them. But here's what most people miss. Tikkun Olam isn't altruism that conflicts with prosperity. It's the secret engine that drives it. When your wealth is connected to a purpose larger than your personal comfort, you unlock a level of energy, creativity, and magnetic attraction that self-focused wealth-seeking can never access. Let me explain why purpose is such a powerful multiplier of prosperity. When you're pursuing money just to have more money, just to be comfortable, just to buy things or impress people, you're operating from a very small motivation. Your subconscious knows that beyond a certain point of comfort and security, more money doesn't really change your life significantly. So it doesn't mobilize all your resources to help you create it. You might work hard, but there's always a ceiling because deep down, you don't have a compelling enough reason to break through to the next level. You hit a level of enough, and your drive diminishes, even if you consciously want more. But when your wealth is connected to a mission that's bigger than you, when you're building a business that solves a real problem, when you're creating jobs that support families, when you're generating resources that fund causes you care about, when you're developing innovations that improve lives, suddenly you have access to a completely different level of energy. Your purpose bypasses the logical limitations your mind puts on how much you can achieve. It activates parts of your brain that respond to meaning and contribution. It generates emotions powerful enough to override fear and doubt. It creates a magnetic field so coherent that opportunities, resources, and people are drawn to you almost effortlessly. I worked with a woman named Miriam who was struggling to grow her consulting practice beyond a subsistence level. She was talented, experienced, and hard-working, but she couldn't break through 6 figures no matter what she tried. When I asked her why she did this work, she said, "To make a living, to have flexibility, to be my own boss." All perfectly reasonable answers, but notice what's missing: any sense of purpose beyond her personal comfort. So I asked her a different question. If money was no object, if you were already wealthy and didn't need to work, what problem in the world would you still want to solve? Her entire energy shifted. Her eyes lit up. She told me about her passion for helping women who'd been through domestic violence rebuild their confidence and careers. She'd been through it herself and had transformed her life, and she wanted other women to know they could too. But she'd never connected this passion to her business because she didn't think it was profitable. She was keeping her purpose and her prosperity in separate boxes, and both were suffering as a result. I challenged Miriam to redesign her entire business around this purpose, to specifically target organizations that serve abuse survivors, to develop programs that address their unique challenges, to speak about this mission openly in all her marketing. She was terrified. She thought limiting her market would limit her income. But the opposite happened. Within 6 months, she'd tripled her revenue. Within a year, she'd built a multi-6-figure business with a waiting list of clients. The difference wasn't her skills or her strategy. Those barely changed. The difference was that she was now operating from purpose, and purpose is magnetic in a way that generic ambition can never be. Here's the neuroscience of why this works. When you're connected to a purpose larger than yourself, your brain releases dopamine and serotonin, the same chemicals involved in reward and satisfaction, but it also activates your prefrontal cortex in a specific way that enhances long-term thinking, strategic planning, and impulse control. Purpose literally makes you smarter and more capable. It also reduces activity in the amygdala, your fear center, which means you're less likely to be paralyzed by anxiety or risk aversion. You become bolder, more creative, more willing to persist through obstacles because you're not just working for a paycheck. You're working for something that matters. But there's an even deeper level to this. When your wealth is connected to tikkun olam, to genuinely improving the world, you're aligning with a fundamental force in the universe. The quantum field responds to coherence, and there's no frequency more coherent than genuine service. When you're creating value for others, when you're solving real problems, when you're contributing to the greater good, you're operating in harmony with the creative impulse of existence itself. And that alignment opens channels of abundance that ego-driven pursuits can never access. The Jewish people have understood this for thousands of years. The most successful Jewish entrepreneurs, innovators, and philanthropists consistently speak about business as a vehicle for contribution. They don't see wealth creation and world improvement as separate activities. They see them as intimately connected. You create wealth by creating value. You create massive wealth by creating massive value. And the more your wealth benefits others, the more the universe conspires to increase it. This isn't spiritual bypassing or naive idealism. This is how energy works. This is how consciousness creates reality. Think about the most successful companies in the world. The ones that have created extraordinary wealth for their founders aren't the ones that just wanted to make money. They're the ones that solved genuine problems at scale. Google made information accessible. Apple made technology beautiful and intuitive. Amazon made shopping convenient. Tesla is advancing sustainable transportation. These companies created wealth in direct proportion to the value they created for the world. Their purpose was their prosperity engine. The founders became billionaires not despite their focus on contribution, but because of it. Now you don't need to build a billion-dollar company to harness this principle. The scale doesn't matter. The consciousness does. Whether you're a solo practitioner, a small business owner, an employee, or an entrepreneur building an empire, when you connect your work to genuine service, when you see yourself as a contributor to Tikkun Olam, you activate prosperity consciousness at the highest level. You shift from asking, "How can I make more money?" to asking, "How can I create more value, solve bigger problems, serve more people?" And the money follows naturally because money is simply a measure of value exchange. Let me tell you about David, who ran a small accounting firm. He was competent, reliable, and completely uninspired. He saw his work as tedious number crunching that paid the bills but didn't mean much. His income was flat for years because his energy was flat. Then one of his clients, a nonprofit serving homeless youth, thanked him profusely for helping them navigate a complex audit. She said, "Because of your work, we can keep our doors open and serve 300 kids this year. You're literally changing lives." Something clicked for David in that moment. He realized his work wasn't just about numbers. It was about enabling organizations to fulfill their mission. He was contributing to Tikkun Olam through his expertise. David completely reframed his practice around this insight. He specialized in serving nonprofits and social enterprises, organizations doing meaningful work in the world. He positioned himself not as an accountant, but as a financial strategist who helped changemakers maximize their impact. His marketing spoke to mission and purpose. His client conversations focused on how proper financial management enabled greater service, and his income tripled in 18 months. Same skills, same hours worked, but completely different energy and results. He'd connected his prosperity to purpose, and everything changed. This principle applies regardless of what you do. If you're a teacher, you're not just conveying information, you're shaping minds that will improve the world. If you're a cleaner, you're not just removing dirt. You're creating environments where people can be healthy and productive. If you're a salesperson, you're not just pushing products. You're helping people access solutions that improve their lives. Every occupation can be connected to Tikkun Olam when you shift your perspective from "what am I getting" to "what am I giving?" And that shift in consciousness is what activates extraordinary prosperity. There's also something profound that happens when you know your wealth will be used for good beyond yourself. It removes guilt and conflicted feelings about having money. Many people unconsciously sabotage their wealth because they have unexamined beliefs that being rich is selfish or that wanting money is greedy. But when your wealth is explicitly connected to contribution, when you know that the more you make, the more you can give, the more impact you can have, the more people you can employ, the more causes you can support, suddenly wealth becomes not just acceptable, but essential. You have a moral obligation to become as wealthy as possible, because wealth in your hands becomes a force for good. This is why many of the most prosperous Jewish families have philanthropic foundations and giving vehicles built into their wealth from the beginning. They're not waiting until they're rich to think about giving back. They're giving into the structure of their wealth creation, which creates a feedback loop. The more they make, the more they give. The more they give, the more aligned they feel. The more aligned they feel, the more prosperity flows. It's a virtuous cycle that accelerates over time. I want you to think about your own relationship with wealth and purpose right now. Do you see them as separate? Do you think you need to get wealthy first and then you can worry about contribution later? That's backwards, and it's why most people never achieve significant wealth. You need to connect them now, regardless of your current financial situation. You need to define how your work, whatever it is, contributes to improving the world. You need to see yourself as an agent of Tikkun Olam, using your unique gifts and talents to repair, heal, and elevate whatever corner of the world you touch. This doesn't mean you need to quit your job and start a nonprofit. It means you need to reframe what you're already doing in terms of genuine service. If you're in corporate sales, you're helping businesses access tools that make them more efficient. If you're in healthcare, you're obviously contributing to well-being. If you're in finance, you're helping people secure their futures and achieve their dreams. If you're in entertainment, you're bringing joy and escape to people who need it. Whatever you do, there's a way to connect it to contribution, if you're willing to look for it. And here's what happens when you make this connection real in your consciousness. First, your energy shifts. You wake up with more motivation because you're not just working for a paycheck. You're working for something meaningful. Second, your message becomes more compelling. When you speak about your work from a place of genuine service, people feel it and respond to it. Third, your decision-making improves. When you have a clear purpose as your North Star, choices become obvious. You pursue opportunities that align with your mission and decline those that don't. Fourth, your persistence increases dramatically. When obstacles arise, and they always do, purpose gives you the fuel to push through when mere ambition would have you quit. There's also something beautiful that happens in your relationship with money itself when it's connected to purpose. Money stops being this charged, emotionally complicated thing that you're simultaneously desperate for and guilty about wanting. It becomes simply a tool, a resource, energy that flows through you to create the impact you're here to make. You can pursue it without apology because you know what it will be used for. You can receive it without guilt because you're receiving it on behalf of something bigger than yourself. You can give it generously because you trust more will come to fuel your mission. The practice of tikkun olam also protects you from one of the biggest pitfalls of wealth creation: emptiness. There are countless stories of people who achieved financial success only to feel hollow and unfulfilled. They climbed the ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. They got everything they thought they wanted only to ask, "Is this all there is?" This happens when wealth is pursued for its own sake, when there's no meaning attached to it beyond accumulation and consumption. But when your wealth is built on purpose, when every dollar represents contribution, when your prosperity enables greater service, you're fulfilled at every level of the journey. The process has meaning, not just the destination. Let me give you a specific practice for connecting your current work to tikkun olam. Take a few minutes to trace the impact chain of what you do. Who directly benefits from your work? How does that benefit ripple outward? Whose lives are improved because of the value you create? If you make sandwiches at a deli, you're nourishing people so they have energy to do their work, which might be teaching children or caring for the sick or building infrastructure. You're part of a chain of contribution. If you process insurance claims, you're helping people receive resources when they're vulnerable. If you write code, you're building tools that make people's lives easier. Follow the chain far enough, and you'll find genuine contribution. Once you see this connection, speak about it. Change how you think about your work and how you describe it to others. Stop saying, "I'm just anything." You're a contributor to tikkun olam, using your specific skills and position. Own that, feel it, let it energize you, and watch how opportunities begin multiplying when you operate from this consciousness. The quantum field responds to genuine service with matching circumstances. People who need what you offer are magnetically drawn to you. Resources flow more easily. Obstacles seem to dissolve, not because the universe is rewarding you for being good, but because you're operating at a frequency that naturally attracts abundance. Here's another layer to this principle that's crucial to understand. When you're connected to purpose, you gain access to a type of creativity and innovation that ego-driven thinking cannot access. Your purpose opens your mind to solutions you wouldn't have seen otherwise. It connects you with people and resources you wouldn't have found through normal channels. It gives you insights that feel like downloads from a higher intelligence. This isn't mystical. It's how consciousness works. When your awareness expands beyond personal gain to collective benefit, you tap into collective intelligence. You become a channel for ideas and solutions that serve the greater good, and those ideas and solutions naturally create wealth. I've experienced this countless times in my own work. The insights that have most transformed my business and multiplied my income haven't come from strategic planning sessions or competitive analysis. They've come in moments when I was deeply connected to my purpose of helping people transform their consciousness and create better lives. The ideas felt like gifts, like transmissions from a source beyond my individual mind, and implementing them created value for my clients and abundance for me simultaneously. This is the magic of Tikkun Olam. It aligns you with creative forces larger than your individual capacity. So tonight, as you rest here, I want you to connect with the deepest truth of why you're here on this planet. Not what you do for a living, but why you're alive. What's your unique contribution? What problem are you here to solve? What gift are you here to give? What corner of the world needs the repair, healing, or elevation that only you can provide? Let yourself feel the power of having a purpose, a mission, a reason for existence that transcends personal comfort. Feel how much energy becomes available when you're in service to something meaningful, and then connect that purpose to your prosperity. See that the wealth you desire isn't separate from the contribution you're here to make. It's the fuel for it. The more money you have, the more impact you can create. The more successful you become, the more people you can serve. The more abundant you are, the more you can give. Your prosperity and your purpose are not in conflict. They're in partnership. One enables and amplifies the other. This is the consciousness of Tikkun Olam. This is how the most successful people think about wealth. And this is the frequency that will multiply your abundance beyond what personal ambition alone could ever achieve. You are here to repair some aspect of the world that only you can repair. You have unique gifts, experiences, perspectives, and capabilities that equip you for a specific contribution. And you deserve to be abundantly compensated for that contribution, because that compensation allows you to do it at greater scale, with greater impact, for longer duration. This is not selfish. This is aligned. This is not greedy. This is responsible stewardship. This is not materialistic. This is understanding that in the physical world, resources matter, and money is a tool for good when wielded by people committed to Tikkun Olam. So make this commitment right now. I will connect my prosperity to purpose. I will see my work as contribution. I will use my wealth to improve the world. I will become as abundant as possible so I can have maximum positive impact. I am an agent of Tikkun Olam, and my prosperity serves something far greater than myself. Feel the truth of this commitment settle into your cells, your nervous system, your subconscious mind. This is the consciousness that unlocks unlimited abundance. This is the frequency that attracts extraordinary wealth. This is you aligning with your highest purpose and your greatest prosperity simultaneously. They are one and the same. Chapter 8, The Mazel Mindset, Reprogramming Your Luck. There's a Hebrew word that gets thrown around at Jewish celebrations and has even entered mainstream culture. Mazel. Most people know it from the expression Mazel Tov, which they think means good luck. or congratulations. But the actual meaning of mazel is far more profound and holds one of the most powerful secrets of prosperity consciousness. Mazel literally means constellation, or the flow of energy from above. It's not luck in the sense of random chance. It's the alignment of your consciousness with favorable frequencies in the quantum field. And here's the revolutionary truth. Mazel isn't something that happens to you. It's something you create through the vibrational state you maintain. You can literally reprogram your luck by reprogramming your frequency. Let me explain something that will change how you see every good and bad thing that's ever happened in your life. There's no such thing as random luck. The universe doesn't roll dice to determine who gets opportunities and who doesn't. What looks like luck from the outside is actually the result of invisible but very real energetic alignment. When you're vibrating at a certain frequency, you attract circumstances, people, and opportunities that match that frequency. When someone seems consistently lucky, what they've actually done is stabilized their consciousness at a frequency that attracts favorable outcome. And the Jewish concept of mazel is essentially a technology for maintaining that frequency. Think about the people you know who seem to have good luck. Follow them everywhere. They randomly meet the right person at the right time. Opportunities fall into their lap. Problems resolve themselves. Money shows up unexpectedly. Doors open that were closed for everyone else. Meanwhile, other people seem cursed with bad luck. Everything they touch goes wrong. They work just as hard, but nothing works out. They're always in the wrong place at the wrong time. What's the difference? It's not divine favoritism or random chance. It's vibrational frequency. It's consciousness. It's what the Jewish tradition calls having good mazel. Now, before you think this is just positive thinking or wishful believing, let me show you the science. Your body generates an electromagnetic field that extends several feet beyond your physical form. This field is strongest around your heart and brain, and it's constantly broadcasting information into the environment. When you're in an elevated emotional state, gratitude, joy, love, enthusiasm, excitement, your electromagnetic field becomes coherent, organized, and powerful. This coherent field actually affects physical reality around you in measurable ways. It influences other people's nervous systems when you're near them. It affects electronic equipment. And most importantly, it interacts with the quantum field in ways that make certain possibilities more likely to collapse into your experience. But when you're in survival emotions, fear, anger, resentment, worry, scarcity, victimhood, your electromagnetic field becomes chaotic and incoherent. This incoherent field pushes favorable opportunities away. It creates a frequency mismatch with the very things you say you want. You might consciously want wealth and success, but if your emotional state is generating a field of lack and limitation, that's what you'll experience. Your electromagnetic signature is your true prayer, your real request to the universe, and it's always being answered with matching circumstances. This is why the Jewish practice of making blessings constantly, of maintaining gratitude as a default state, of celebrating everything, is so powerful. These practices aren't just nice religious rituals. They're tools for maintaining a coherent electromagnetic field. Every time you make a blessing, you shift your emotional state toward appreciation. Every time you celebrate, you generate joy. Every time you express gratitude, you create coherence. You're actively managing your vibrational frequency, which means you're actively managing your mazel. You're programming yourself to be lucky. Let me tell you about Benjamin, who came to me convinced he was cursed. Everything in his life seemed to go wrong. Business deals fell through. Relationships ended badly. His car broke down constantly. He got sick more than anyone else. He'd applied for dozens of jobs and couldn't get hired. He was intelligent, capable, and hard-working, but nothing worked. As I got to know him, I discovered his entire inner dialogue was a stream of negative expectation. This will probably go wrong. Nothing ever works for me. Bad things always happen to me. I'm just unlucky. The universe is against me. He'd say these things casually, as if they were objective facts, rather than programs running in his subconscious. I asked Benjamin to do something radical. For 30 days, I wanted him to act as if he had the best luck in the world. Not to pretend his problems didn't exist, but to interpret everything through the lens of, I'm incredibly lucky. If something went wrong, find the hidden benefit. If something went right, acknowledge it enthusiastically. If something neutral happened, appreciate it. Tell everyone who would listen about his good fortune. Catch himself every time he started to say something negative and flip it. He resisted at first because it felt fake, inauthentic, like lying to himself. But I explained that his current programming was the lie. Acting as if he was lucky was actually closer to truth, because luck is just aligned frequency, and he could create that alignment. Benjamin committed to the experiment. The first week was awkward. He had to force himself to reframe situations. His car broke down, and instead of his usual, "Of course, this happened to me," he said, "I'm lucky it broke down near a gas station instead of on the highway." A client canceled, and instead of "nothing ever works out," he said, "I'm lucky to have time freed up for an even better client." Someone cut him off in traffic, and instead of rage, he said, "I'm lucky to have good reflexes that kept me safe." It felt mechanical, insincere, but he kept going. By week 3, something shifted. Benjamin started noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. A friend mentioned a job opening that was perfect for him. He got a parking spot right in front of every place he went. He found a $20 bill on the street. Small things, but they were adding up. By week 4, the changes accelerated. He got hired for the job, at a higher salary than he'd been making before. His health improved. His car, miraculously, stopped having problems. Within 3 months, Benjamin's entire life had transformed. Same person, same city, same circumstances on the surface, but completely different results. What changed? His mazel, his frequency, his electromagnetic signature. Here's what happened at the energetic level. When Benjamin started acting as if he was lucky, his brain began producing different neurochemicals. His stress hormones decreased. His feel-good hormones increased. This changed his physiology, which changed his electromagnetic field, which changed what he attracted. His reticular activating system, programmed for decades to spot problems and threats, began retraining itself to spot opportunities and blessing. He was literally seeing a different reality, not because reality changed, but because his perception changed. And since reality is observer-dependent at the quantum level, his perception shift created an actual shift in his experienced reality. This is the power of the Mazel mindset. It's not about denying problems or pretending everything is perfect. It's about training your consciousness to operate from the assumption that you're favored by life, that things work out for you, that you're aligned with beneficial forces. And when you hold that consciousness consistently, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, not because you're fooling yourself, but because you're aligning your frequency with favorable outcome. The Jewish tradition has a practice that exemplifies this perfectly. When something bad happens, religious Jews say, Gam Zul Tova, which means, this too is for good. Not I'm going to pretend this is good when it's clearly bad, but there's something beneficial in this situation, even if I can't see it yet. This practice immediately shifts your frequency from victim to empowered observer. You're training your brain to search for the benefit, the lesson, the hidden opportunity in every challenge. And your brain always finds what you tell it to look for. I've practiced this for years now, and it's completely changed my experience of life. When something appears to go wrong, my automatic response is, I wonder what good thing this is leading to. Not as a desperate attempt to feel better, but as a genuine curiosity born from years of evidence that things do work out, that obstacles often redirect me to better paths, that what seems like bad luck in the moment often reveals itself as good fortune in hindsight. This mindset doesn't eliminate challenges, but it eliminates the suffering that comes from interpreting challenges as evidence that life is against you. Let's talk about the quantum mechanics of this, because understanding the science makes the practice more powerful. In quantum physics, particles exist in superposition, multiple potential states simultaneously, until observed. The act of observation collapses the wave function into one specific state. Now apply this to your life. Every moment contains infinite possibilities. Which possibility becomes your actual experience depends on what you're observing for, what you're expecting, what frequency you're broadcasting. If you're expecting bad luck, your observation collapses possibilities toward that. If you're expecting good fortune, your observation collapses possibilities toward that. This isn't magical thinking. This is how consciousness interacts with the quantum field. Your expectations aren't passive predictions. They're active participants in creating outcomes. This is why the Mazel mindset is so powerful. By consistently expecting favorable outcomes, by interpreting events through a lucky lens, by maintaining the feeling of being fortunate, you're actively collapsing quantum possibilities toward beneficial outcomes. You're not hoping for luck. You're generating it through your vibrational frequency. Now, some of you might be thinking, but terrible things do happen to people with positive attitudes. Good people get sick, have accidents, face tragedies. How does Mazel explain that? And you're right. We live in a physical world with physical laws, biological realities, and collective circumstances beyond individual control. The Mazel mindset doesn't make you invincible or exempt from all challenges. What it does is change your relationship to those challenges and dramatically increase your probability of favorable outcomes. It shifts you from the most likely timeline to a better timeline. It doesn't eliminate all problems, but it reduces them, softens them, and helps you navigate them with greater ease and more positive resolution. Think of it this way. Imagine life as a field of infinite possible paths. Some paths have more obstacles, more suffering, more difficulty. Other paths have more ease, more opportunity, more favorable circumstances. You're navigating this field constantly through your choices and your consciousness. The Mazel mindset is like having a guidance system that automatically steers you toward the better paths. You might not avoid all obstacles, but you'll encounter far fewer than you would have otherwise. And the obstacles you do encounter, you'll handle with more resources, more support, more resilience. The practice of maintaining good Mazel requires vigilance, because the default programming for most people is negative. Our survival-oriented brains are wired to spot threats and problems. We evolved this way because in dangerous environments, the optimist who missed the threat didn't survive. But we don't live in those environments anymore, and that same threat detection system now sabotages our prosperity. It makes us expect the worst, prepare for disaster, and focus on what could go wrong. This consciousness creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of bad luck. Reprogramming this requires conscious, consistent practice. You have to catch your negative expectations and flip them. You have to notice when you're anticipating problems and shift to anticipating solutions. You have to interrupt your victim stories and replace them with empowered interpretation. This isn't about suppressing real feelings or toxic positivity. It's about managing your frequency deliberately, because you understand that your frequency determines your experience. Here's a powerful practice for cultivating Mazel consciousness. Every night before sleep, recall at least 5 moments from your day when things went right, when you got lucky, when circumstances favored you. They can be tiny things. You hit green lights, someone smiled at you, you found a good parking spot, your coffee was perfectly made, you had a good idea, someone said yes to your request. Most people's days are filled with hundreds of small fortunes that go completely unnoticed because their attention is trained on problems. By deliberately focusing on your luck at the end of each day, you're retraining your RAS to notice luck, which makes you see more luck, which makes you feel more lucky, which shifts your frequency, which creates more luck. It's a virtuous cycle. You should also pay attention to your language around luck. Stop saying, "I'm so unlucky," or "nothing ever goes my way," or "things like that don't happen to people like me." These statements are programming commands to your subconscious and broadcasts to the quantum field. Replace them with, "I'm incredibly fortunate. Things consistently work out for me. I'm in the right place at the right time. Opportunities find me easily." Say these things even when, especially when, your circumstances don't reflect them yet. You're not describing current reality. You're creating future reality through your vibrational programming. There's a Jewish custom at weddings and celebrations where people shout Mazel Tov enthusiastically, sometimes over and over. This isn't just congratulating the celebrants. It's a communal practice of generating elevated emotion, of creating a coherent collective field of joy and blessing. Everyone present is raising their frequency together, which amplifies the effect exponentially. This is why Jewish celebrations are often so exuberant, so loud, so energetic. They're not just marking occasions. They're generating Mazel through elevated emotional states. You can harness this principle in your own life. When good things happen, don't just quietly acknowledge them. Celebrate enthusiastically. Tell people. Generate joy and excitement. You're not bragging. You're amplifying the frequency that attracted the good thing so you can attract more. When you celebrate your wins, you're programming your subconscious to expect more wins. You're generating an electromagnetic field of success. You're training your nervous system to be comfortable with good fortune. Many people have an unconscious discomfort with too much good luck. They worry that if things go too well, something bad must be coming to balance it out. This belief is absolutely toxic to prosperity because it causes you to unconsciously sabotage your own success. You get close to a big breakthrough and you subtly pull back because you're afraid of the backlash you've been conditioned to expect. Breaking this pattern requires consciously embracing the belief that you can have continuous good fortune, that success builds on success, that luck compounds, that the universe isn't keeping score and trying to balance your accounts with suffering. The Mazel mindset also affects how you make decisions. When you believe you're lucky, you're more willing to take calculated risks because you trust that things will work out. You say yes to opportunities that others pass on because they seem too good to be true. You put yourself in situations where luck can find you. This is crucial because luck is often described as preparation meeting opportunity, but really it's high-frequency consciousness in environments where favorable possibilities exist. You have to show up, take action, and put yourself in the game. But when you show up with the frequency of expecting good fortune, you experience it. I want to address a misconception. Some people think that believing you're lucky means you don't have to work hard, or that everything will just fall in your lap. That's not how it works. The Maisel mindset makes your work more effective, not unnecessary. It means when you work hard, you get extraordinary results instead of average results. It means your effort compounds in ways that it doesn't for people operating from unlucky consciousness. It means you work smart because you're being guided by intuition and synchronicity. You still take action, but your action is amplified by favorable forces. Think about successful people in any field. Yes, they work hard, but they also seem to have uncanny timing, to be in the right place at the right time, to meet the right people, to have doors open just when they need them. This isn't separate from their hard work. It's their hard work multiplied by good Maisel, and their good Maisel comes from maintaining a frequency of expectation, possibility, and trust. They believe things will work out, so they do. They expect opportunities, so they see them. They feel fortunate, so they are. As you rest here tonight, I want you to make a decision. Decide right now that you are incredibly lucky, that the universe favors you, that things consistently work out in your favor, that you're aligned with beneficial forces, that opportunities seek you out, that you're in the flow of good fortune. Don't wait for evidence. Generate the belief first, and watch the evidence follow. This is how Maisel works. You don't become lucky by having good things happen. Good things happen because you've programmed yourself to be lucky through your consistent vibrational frequency. Feel what it would feel like to be the luckiest person you know. Feel the ease, the confidence, the expectation of positive outcome. Feel how you'd walk through the world if you knew that everything was working in your favor. Feel the trust, the openness, the willingness to take chances because you believe they'll work out. Let this feeling saturate your nervous system. This is your new frequency. This is your Maisel consciousness. And from this consciousness, your life will reflect back to you the luck you've programmed yourself to experience. You are lucky. You are blessed. You are favored by life. Things work out for you. Opportunities find you. People help you. Resources appear when you need them. Challenges contain hidden benefits. Obstacles redirect you to better paths. Your timing is perfect. You're in the right place, at the right time. Good fortune follows you. This is your truth. This is your reality. This is your Maisel. Claim it, embody it, expect it, and watch your entire experience of life transform from random chaos to guided perfection. This is not wishful thinking. This is understanding how consciousness creates reality and using that understanding to program the best possible reality for yourself. Your luck is in your hands, or more accurately, in your frequency. Tune it to fortune, and fortune becomes your constant companion. Chapter 9. Pikuach Nefesh, the supreme value of life. There's a principle in Jewish law so fundamental that it overrides almost every other commandment. Pikuach Nefesh, the preservation and sanctity of life. If saving a life requires breaking the Sabbath, you break the Sabbath. If saving a life requires eating non-kosher food, you eat it. If preserving life requires violating sacred rituals, you violate them without hesitation. Life comes first, always, above all rules and regulations, and this principle reveals something profound about prosperity consciousness that most people completely miss. Your ability to create wealth is directly proportional to how deeply you value your own life, not your ego, not your accomplishments, not your status, but your actual existence, your vitality, your well-being. The more you treat your life as supremely valuable, the more abundance flows to sustain and enhance it. Let me explain why this is so crucial. Most people have been programmed with subtle but toxic beliefs that devalue their own existence. They sacrifice their health for work. They deplete their energy for others' approval. They ignore their needs to meet everyone else's demands. They work themselves into exhaustion to prove their worth. They postpone joy, rest, and fulfillment until some future moment when they finally earned it. This consciousness doesn't just harm your well-being. It obliterates your prosperity, because at a subconscious level, you're telling the universe that your life isn't that valuable, that your existence is conditional, that you're worth less than the demands placed on you. And the universe, being a perfect mirror of your consciousness, reflects back circumstances that match that frequency. Circumstances of scarcity, struggle, and depletion. But when you operate from pikuach nefesh consciousness, when you treat your life as the most precious thing in existence, everything shifts. You make decisions that honor your well-being. You set boundaries that protect your energy. You refuse opportunities that would deplete you. You charge prices that reflect your worth. You demand respect and decent treatment. You prioritize rest, health, joy, and fulfillment. And paradoxically, this self-honoring consciousness doesn't limit your prosperity, it explodes it. Because when you deeply value your own life, you become magnetic to circumstances that support and enhance it. The universe matches the value you place on yourself. Think about the most successful, prosperous people you know or have studied. I'm willing to bet they have strong boundaries. They prioritize their well-being. They don't sacrifice their health for achievement. They take excellent care of themselves. They say no to things that don't serve them. And they unapologetically pursue what brings them joy and fulfillment. This isn't selfish. This is pikuach nefesh consciousness. This is understanding that your life has supreme value and acting accordingly. And this consciousness creates prosperity because it broadcasts a frequency of worthiness, sufficiency, and high value that attracts matching circumstances. Let me share a story about Elena, a brilliant physician who came to me burned out and resentful despite making excellent income. She was working 70-hour weeks, seeing patients back-to-back with no breaks, eating lunch at her desk while doing paperwork, responding to messages at all hours, and constantly available to everyone who needed her. She told me with pride, "I'm completely dedicated to my patients. Their needs come before everything." I asked her, "Including your own life?" She looked confused. "What do you mean?" I said, "You're violating pikuach nefesh every single day. You're sacrificing your health, your well-being, your relationships, your joy, essentially your life, for your work. And Jewish law says clearly that your life has supreme value. You're commanded to preserve it, even if it means disappointing people." Elena was shocked. She'd never considered that her martyrdom might be spiritually and energetically wrong, not just personally costly. She'd been taught that being a good doctor meant complete self-sacrifice, but I explained that by depleting herself, she was actually serving her patients less effectively. A burned-out physician makes worse decisions, has less empathy, and provides lower-quality care than one who's rested and fulfilled. More importantly, by treating her own life as less valuable than her work, she was programming her consciousness for scarcity. She was literally telling the universe through her actions that her existence was worth less than her productivity, and that consciousness was blocking the flow of true abundance. I challenged Elena to restructure her practice around pikuach nefesh, shorter work days, mandatory lunch breaks away from her desk, no messages after 7 p.m., one day off completely disconnected, regular exercise, time for friends and hobbies. She was terrified her patients would leave, her income would drop, her reputation would suffer, but she agreed to try for 3 months. And here's what happened. Within weeks, Elena felt more energized than she had in years. Her clarity and creativity returned. She started seeing solutions to practice problems she'd been too exhausted to notice before. Her patients actually responded better to her because she was more present and compassionate when she was with them. But the real magic happened in her income. Within 6 months of implementing boundaries and prioritizing her well-being, Elena's income increased by 40%. How? She raised her rates because she finally valued herself enough to charge what she was worth. She attracted better patients who respected her boundaries and paid promptly. She had the energy and clarity to develop additional revenue streams. She made better business decisions because her depleted survival brain wasn't running the show anymore. The prosperity didn't come from working more. It came from valuing her life more. This is the power of Pikuach Nefesh consciousness. When you treat your life as supremely valuable, you start making choices that someone valuable would make. You don't tolerate disrespect. You don't accept poverty wages. You don't sacrifice your health for anyone's approval. You don't deplete yourself to prove you're worthy. You already know you're worthy because your existence itself has infinite value. And from that consciousness, you naturally attract circumstances that reflect that value back to you. There's deep neuroscience behind why this works. When you chronically deplete yourself, sacrifice your needs, and ignore your well-being, you keep your nervous system in sympathetic dominance, the stress response. In this state, your body is literally in survival mode. Blood flow moves away from your prefrontal cortex, limiting your ability to think strategically and creatively. Your immune system suppresses. Your digestion shuts down. Your cells go into protection mode rather than growth mode. You're operating from your reptilian brain, which can only see threats and react defensively. From this state, you cannot access the higher consciousness required to create wealth. You're just trying to survive, and survival consciousness creates survival circumstances. But when you practice Pikuach Nefesh, when you prioritize your well-being, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and renewal state. In this state, your body heals, your brain accesses higher functions, your creativity activates, your intuition sharpens, your immune system strengthens. You're operating from your prefrontal cortex, which can see possibilities, make long-term plans, and connect dots that the survival brain misses. From this state, you can create wealth because you're accessing the full intelligence of your being rather than just the reactive instincts of your most primitive brain structures. There's also something profound that happens at the quantum level. Your body is constantly generating an electromagnetic field, and the coherence of that field determines what you attract. When you're depleted, stressed, and sacrificing your well-being, your field becomes chaotic and weak. It can't attract opportunities or resources effectively. But when you're rested, nourished, and honoring your life, your field becomes strong and coherent. This coherent field is magnetic to matching circumstances of abundance, opportunity, and support. You're not just feeling better. You're broadcasting a completely different signal to the quantum field, and that signal returns circumstances that match its frequency. Let me address a fear that might be coming up. If I prioritize my own well-being, won't people think I'm selfish? Won't I lose opportunities? Won't I be seen as lazy or uncommitted? Here's the truth. People who demand that you sacrifice your well-being for their benefit don't actually value you. They're using you. And the opportunities that require your depletion aren't real opportunities. They're traps disguised as advancement. When you implement boundaries and prioritize Pikuach Nefesh, yes, some people will be uncomfortable. Some will leave. Some will judge you. and every single one of them was blocking your path to real prosperity. Their departure creates space for people and opportunities that honor your value. Think about what you're actually modeling when you sacrifice your well-being for productivity. You're teaching everyone around you that life has less value than achievement, that existence is conditional upon performance, that worth must be earned through depletion. If you have children, you're programming them with this toxic consciousness. If you lead a team, you're creating a culture of burnout. If you're self-employed, you're becoming a slave to a business that should be serving your life, not consuming it. The price of this consciousness isn't just your personal suffering. It's the perpetuation of a destructive pattern that harms everyone it touches. But when you embody pikuach nefesh, you become a living example of a different possibility. You show that it's possible to be successful without sacrificing your life. You prove that boundaries increase rather than decrease prosperity. You model that well-being and wealth aren't opposing forces, but synergistic partners. You give others permission to value their own lives by valuing yours. This isn't selfish. This is revolutionary. This is breaking a toxic cultural pattern that has kept people in unnecessary suffering for generations. The Jewish tradition's elevation of pikuach nefesh above all other laws isn't arbitrary. It's recognizing something fundamental about how reality works. Your life is the vehicle through which you experience everything, every joy, every achievement, every relationship, every moment of abundance. Without your life, nothing else matters. So protecting, preserving, and enhancing your life isn't optional. It's the foundation on which everything else is built. And when you truly understand this, when you make every decision through the filter of, does this honor my life, you align with a force that naturally creates prosperity. Here's a practice that will immediately shift your consciousness. For the next week, before making any decision, ask yourself, does this honor the supreme value of my life? Not, will this make me money? Or, will this make people happy? Or, is this what I should do? But specifically, does this honor my life as supremely valuable? If you're about to say yes to a project that will require 80-hour weeks, ask the question. If you're about to accept payment that's less than your worth, ask the question. If you're about to skip lunch again to keep working, ask the question. If you're about to sacrifice sleep for productivity, ask the question. And if the answer is no, have the courage to make a different choice. This practice will feel uncomfortable at first because you've probably been programmed to believe that honoring your life is selfish. Your old programming will scream that you're being lazy, entitled, or irresponsible, but push through that resistance. Trust that the Jewish tradition, which has produced extraordinary prosperity for thousands of years, knows something about the relationship between self-value and wealth creation. Trust that pikuach nefesh isn't just a religious principle. It's a consciousness technology that aligns you with abundance. Let me tell you what happens when you consistently practice this. First, your energy increases dramatically. When you stop depleting yourself, you have actual vitality to invest in creative pursuits. Second, your decision-making improves exponentially. When you're rested and nourished, you can see possibilities and make connections that exhaustion blinds you to. Third, your confidence grows. When you treat yourself as valuable, you start believing you're valuable, and that belief changes how you show up in every interaction. Fourth, your magnetic attraction strengthens. People and opportunities that resonate with your value are drawn to you, while those that would exploit you repel away. There's also a specific application of pikuach nefesh to money that's crucial. If money is required to preserve or enhance your life, you're not just allowed, but obligated to pursue it. and receive it. This means if you need money for health care, for nutritious food, for safe housing, for rest and recovery, for anything that genuinely serves your well-being, pursuing that money is a sacred act. It's not greedy. It's pikwash nefesh. You're not being materialistic. You're honoring the supreme value of your existence. This reframe eliminates guilt around wanting and seeking wealth for your genuine needs. But here's where it gets even more interesting. When you deeply value your own life, you start valuing other people's lives in the same way. Pikwach Nefesh isn't just about your own preservation. It's about recognizing the supreme value of every human life. This creates a consciousness of mutual respect, of fair exchange, of genuine service rather than exploitation. When you're creating wealth from this consciousness, you're creating it in ways that honor everyone involved. You're not getting rich by depleting others. You're creating prosperity that enhances all lives it touches. This is sustainable wealth, ethical wealth, wealth that grows without guilt or karmic debt. I want you to think about how different your life would be if you truly, deeply believed that your existence has supreme value. Not conditional value based on what you accomplish or produce, but inherent value simply because you're alive. How would you structure your days? What boundaries would you set? What would you say no to? What would you demand? How would you price your services? What treatment would you accept or refuse? Who would you spend time with? What investments would you make in yourself? Feel into this for a moment. Feel the power of knowing your life is infinitely valuable. Now imagine making all your decisions from that consciousness, not asking, what will make me the most money, but what most honors my life, while also creating value for others. Not asking, what should I do, but what does someone whose life has supreme value choose to do? Not asking, can I afford this, but does investing in my well-being serve my highest prosperity? This is radically different from how most people make decisions, and it produces radically different results. It produces the kind of prosperity that's sustainable because it's built on self-honor rather than self-sacrifice. The wealthiest people I've ever worked with, the ones who've built lasting fortunes and maintained their well-being, all embody Pikwak Nefesh consciousness, whether they use that term or not. They have non-negotiable boundaries. They invest heavily in their health and well-being. They take vacations and actually disconnect. They say no to opportunities that would deplete them. They surround themselves with people who honor their value. They make business decisions that serve their life, rather than sacrificing their life to business. And this isn't because they've earned the right to have boundaries after becoming wealthy. They became wealthy because they always had boundaries. The self-value came first, and the wealth followed. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, I want you to make a declaration. Say out loud or silently with conviction, my life has supreme value. I honor my existence above all demands and expectations. I protect my well-being as sacred. I make decisions that enhance rather than deplete my life force. I attract circumstances that support and celebrate my vitality. I am worthy of extraordinary care, rest, joy, and abundance, simply because I exist. This is not selfish. This is aligned with the deepest truth of reality. My life is precious, and I will treat it as such. Feel this declaration settle into your bones, your cells, your nervous system. Feel what it's like to know, not just think, but know, that your life has infinite worth. Feel the shift in your energy when you're not defending or proving your value, but simply standing in the truth of it. This is Pikwach Nefesh consciousness. This is the foundation of unshakable prosperity, because when you value your life supremely, the universe has no choice but to reflect that value back to you in every form, including financial abundance. You don't need to earn your worth. You don't need to prove you deserve well-being. You don't need to sacrifice yourself to justify receiving. Your existence itself is the only qualification required. You are alive, and that life is supremely valuable. Honor it, protect it, enhance it, celebrate it, and watch how quickly prosperity flows to someone who knows their own worth. This is the secret the Jewish principle of Pikuach Nefesh has preserved for millennia. Life comes first. Your life comes first, not in opposition to others, but as the foundation from which genuine contribution flows. Value yourself supremely, and supreme value will be yours. Chapter 10. Lech Lecha, the journey to your prosperous self. There's a moment in the biblical story of Abraham that contains the entire secret of transformation, encoded in just 2 words, Lech Lecha. God calls to Abraham and says, Lech Lecha, which is usually translated as, go forth, or go out. But the literal Hebrew translation is far more profound. It means, go to yourself, or go for yourself. Not just leave where you are, but journey toward who you really are. Leave behind the familiar identity that was shaped by your past, your programming, your limitations, your scarcity consciousness, and step into the version of yourself that already exists in the quantum field. The version that's naturally prosperous, magnetically abundant, and aligned with infinite possibility. This is the final and most crucial principle of Jewish prosperity consciousness. Wealth isn't something you acquire out there. It's something you become by journeying to your true self. Everything we've explored in this book, the gratitude practices, the giving, the audacity, the rest, the generational programming, the purpose, the luck mindset, the self-value, all of it has been preparing you for this moment. The moment when you realize that prosperity isn't a destination you arrive at through external achievement. It's an identity you claim by shedding everything that isn't truly you. Every limiting belief, every scarcity pattern, every fear-based behavior, every people-pleasing compromise, every self-sabotaging habit. None of these are you. They're just layers of conditioning that have obscured your naturally abundant self. And the journey of Lech Lecha is the process of peeling away those layers until only your essence remains. And your essence, the true you that exists beyond all programming, is inherently prosperous. Let me explain something that will fundamentally shift how you see your financial journey. You don't need to become someone different to be wealthy. You need to become more fully yourself. The version of you that would naturally attract and create wealth isn't some future person you have to strain to become. It's who you already are beneath the conditioning. It's the you that existed before you learned to be afraid of money, before you absorbed beliefs about scarcity, before you were taught that wanting wealth was greedy, before you developed patterns of self-sabotage. That original you, that unconditioned consciousness, is naturally aligned with abundance, because consciousness itself is abundant. Life force is abundant. Creative potential is abundant. You are abundant at your core. You've just forgotten because you've been wearing the costume of limitation for so long that you think it's who you are. The call of Lech Lecha is the invitation to take off the costume, to stop pretending to be small, to stop performing the role of someone who struggles with money, to stop identifying with the story of limitation that your past has written. This isn't about becoming arrogant or entitled. It's about coming home to yourself. It's about remembering who you were before the world convinced you that you weren't enough, didn't deserve abundance, and had to prove your worth through suffering and sacrifice. The journey to wealth is a journey of remembering, not achieving. It's excavation, not construction. You're not building a new self. You're uncovering your original self. Think about a sculpture trapped inside a block of marble. Michelangelo said he didn't create his sculptures. He simply removed the excess stone to reveal what was already there. This is reshape. You're not creating prosperity consciousness from nothing. You're chiseling away everything that's covering it. Every practice in this book has been a chisel. Every insight has been a strike that removes a piece of limitation. Every shift in consciousness has been revealing more of your naturally abundant self. And now, in this final chapter, you're being called to commit fully to this excavation until the masterpiece of your true self stands fully revealed. Let me tell you about Marcus, a man who'd been working on prosperity consciousness for 15 years. He'd read every book, attended every seminar, practiced every technique. He could recite prosperity principles like scripture, but his financial situation remained stubbornly mediocre. When we met, I asked him a simple question. Who would you have to stop being to allow yourself to be wealthy? He looked confused, so I pushed further. What identity would you have to release? What story about yourself would you have to let die? And then it hit him. He'd built his entire identity around being the struggling artist, the misunderstood genius, the person too spiritual for material success. His poverty wasn't just a circumstance. It was who he thought he was. And unconsciously, he was defending that identity by sabotaging every opportunity to change it. I asked Marcus to do something radical. For 30 days, I wanted him to act as if that struggling artist identity had died. Not to pretend he was already wealthy, but to genuinely release his attachment to being the person who struggled. To stop telling his story of financial hardship. To stop identifying with limitation. To stop using poverty as evidence of his artistic purity. To let that version of himself die so a new version could emerge. He resisted intensely at first because that identity felt like who he was. Letting it go felt like dying, and in a sense it was. It was the death of a false self so the true self could live. Marcus committed to the experiment. He stopped saying, "I'm a struggling artist." He stopped wearing his poverty as a badge of authenticity. He stopped using lack of money as an excuse or explanation. He even avoided people who reinforced that identity through their expectations of him. It was disorienting, like losing gravity. Without that familiar identity to organize his sense of self, he felt groundless. But into that void, something new began emerging. A version of Marcus that was still creative, still artistic, but no longer attached to suffering as proof of his depth. A version that could create beauty and also receive abundance. A version that could be spiritual and also prosperous. Within 3 months, Marcus's income doubled. Within 6 months, he'd sold work for prices he'd never dared ask before. Within a year, he was making more from his art than he'd made in the previous 5 years combined. What changed? Not his talent. He was always talented. Not his work ethic. He'd always worked hard. What changed was his identity. He'd journeyed from the limited self he thought he was to the abundant self he actually was beneath the conditioning. He'd answered the call of reshape. He'd gone to himself, and in doing so, he'd gone to prosperity. This is the work that most people avoid because it requires letting parts of yourself die. Not your essence, but your ego's attachments to stories, identities, and patterns that no longer serve you. The version of you that needs to prove yourself through struggle. The version that finds identity in victimhood. The version that's loyal to family patterns of poverty because changing would feel like betrayal. The version that stays small so others feel comfortable. The version that sabotages success because an unconscious part of you believes you don't deserve it. All these versions are not you. They're costumes you've worn for so long, you forgot they were removable. Reshape is the call to remove them. Here's the quantum physics of why identity shift is so powerful. The quantum field responds not to what you want, but to who you are. Your being creates your reality more than your doing ever could. You can take all the right actions, use all the correct techniques, work harder than everyone else. But if your core identity is person who struggles with money, the quantum field will keep reflecting that identity back to you in the form of circumstances that match it. But when you shift your identity to person who naturally attracts wealth, the quantum field has no choice but to reorganize circumstances to match that new identity. The same actions you were taking before suddenly produce completely different results because you're taking them from a different state of being. This is why affirmations often don't work. You stand in front of a mirror saying, "I am wealthy," while every cell in your body is screaming, "No, you're not. This is a lie." The affirmation isn't reaching the level of identity. It's just words contradicted by your actual sense of self. But Lech Lecha goes deeper. It's not about saying who you want to be. It's about excavating who you actually are beneath the conditioning. It's about recognizing that prosperity isn't something you need to convince yourself of. It's your natural state that's been covered over. The wealthy you isn't a future self you're trying to create. It's your actual self you're trying to uncover. So how do you make this journey? How do you actually go to yourself? First, you must become aware of the identities you're currently wearing. What stories do you tell about yourself in relation to money? I'm not good with money. I always struggle financially. Money and I just don't get along. I'm meant to be poor but happy. Wealthy people are different from me. These aren't truths. They're costumes. Notice them. Name them. Recognize them as temporary constructs rather than permanent reality. This awareness alone begins loosening their grip. Second, you must be willing to let these identities die. This will feel uncomfortable, even scary, because your ego derives security from familiar patterns, even when those patterns cause suffering. There's a comfort in the known struggle that can feel safer than the unknown possibility. But growth requires death of the old. Evolution requires releasing what no longer serves. The caterpillar must dissolve entirely in the cocoon before the butterfly can emerge. You must be willing to enter your own cocoon, that space of unknowing where the old you dissolves before the new you forms. Trust this process even when it feels like disintegration. It's actually transformation. Third, you must start taking actions that the wealthy version of you would take, even before you feel like that person. This is different from fake it till you make it, because you're not pretending to be someone else. You're acting as the person you actually are beneath the conditioning. If the real you is naturally prosperous, how would they carry themselves? How would they speak? What boundaries would they have? What would they charge? What opportunities would they say yes to? What treatment would they refuse? Start embodying that now. Not as performance, but as excavation. You're not pretending to be someone else. You're remembering who you really are. Fourth, you must surround yourself with mirrors that reflect your true self back to you. Most people surround themselves with people and environments that reinforce their limited identity. Family who expect you to struggle, friends who bond over financial complaints, media that programs scarcity, environments that reflect limitation. To journey to your prosperous self, you need mirrors that reflect that self back to you. People who see your abundance, environments that reflect prosperity, content that programs wealth consciousness. You can't become someone new while constantly being reminded of who you used to be. Fifth, you must practice deep listening to your inner wisdom. Beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the programming, beneath all the fear, there's a voice that knows. It knows who you really are. It knows what you're capable of. It knows what brings you alive. It knows what you're here to create. This voice speaks softly, in intuition and impulse and inspiration. The journey of Lech Lecha requires learning to hear this voice and trust it above the loud voices of conditioning, expectation, and fear. This voice will guide you to yourself if you create space to listen and courage to follow. There's a beautiful paradox at the heart of Lech Lecha. The journey to yourself requires leaving yourself. Leaving the self you think you are to discover the self you actually are. Abraham had to leave his father's house, his country, his familiar identity to discover who he was meant to become. He had to go out before he could go in. You must be willing to leave behind everything familiar, the comfortable struggle, the identity you've built, the expectations others have of you, the person you've been performing, to discover the abundant being you actually are beneath all of that. This journey isn't linear. You won't complete it once and be done. It's a continual process of shedding, discovering, embodying, and shedding again at deeper levels. Every time you clear away one layer of conditioning, you reveal more of your true self. And each revelation brings you into greater alignment with your natural prosperity. The practices in this book aren't meant to make you into someone you're not. They're meant to strip away what you're not so what you are can shine through. The gratitude reveals the abundant consciousness that's always been there. The giving dissolves the walls of scarcity. The audacity breaks through false humility. The rest reveals your trust. The purpose connects you to meaning. The luck mindset aligns you with favorable forces. The self-value honors your essence. All of it is Lech Lecha. All of it is going to yourself. I want you to understand something profound as we close this journey together. The prosperity you seek is not in your future. It's not something that will arrive when you've done enough, achieved enough, or transformed enough. It's here, now, in this moment, encoded in your being, waiting for you to claim it by becoming who you actually are. The quantum field already contains the version of you living in complete abundance. That timeline already exists. The question isn't whether you can create it, it's whether you're willing to become the frequency that matches it. And becoming that frequency isn't about adding something to yourself. It's about releasing everything that isn't truly you. So here's your final practice, the practice that integrates everything. Each morning, before you begin your day, ask yourself, who do I need to be today to honor my truly abundant self? Not what do you need to do, but who do you need to be? And then throughout the day, make every choice from that identity. When you're deciding how to price your services, ask, what would my abundant self charge? When you're deciding whether to accept poor treatment, ask, would my abundant self tolerate this? When you're deciding how to spend your time, ask, what would my abundant self choose? You're not asking what would wealthy people do. You're asking what would the wealthy version of you, the real you beneath conditioning, choose in this moment. And then you do that. Again and again, choice by choice. You practice being yourself until it's no longer practice, but simply who you are. And each night, before you sleep, as you're resting here right now, take inventory. In what moments today did you embody your true, prosperous self? Celebrate those moments. Feel the alignment of them. And in what moments did you fall back into old limited identity? Notice them without judgment. They're just old grooves wearing themselves out. The more you choose the new pattern, the weaker the old one becomes. You're literally rewiring your brain, reprogramming your subconscious, and shifting your quantum frequency with every conscious choice to be your true self instead of your conditioned self. The journey of Lech Lecha never ends because there's always more of yourself to discover, deeper layers to excavate, greater expressions of your abundance to embody. But with each step of the journey, prosperity flows more naturally because you're not trying to make it happen from a place of lack. You're allowing it to happen from a place of alignment. You're not chasing wealth. You're becoming wealthy. You're not pursuing prosperity. You're remembering your prosperity itself. This is the ultimate secret. You're not trying to get something you don't have. You're claiming something you've always been. Abraham answered the call of Lech Lecha and became the father of nations, blessed with abundance beyond measure. Not because God randomly chose to favor him, but because he was willing to leave behind everything familiar to discover who he truly was. He went to himself, and in doing so, he went to his destiny. The same call is being extended to you right now. Lech Lecha. Go to yourself. Leave behind the limited identity you've been performing. Release the stories of scarcity that have defined you. Shed the conditioning that has confined you. And step into the abundant being you actually are beneath all of that. This is not a metaphor. This is not inspirational poetry. This is a literal instruction for how to transform your financial reality by transforming your identity. Who you are creates what you experience. Change who you are at the level of identity, and your experience must change to match. The wealthy life you desire isn't waiting for you to achieve certain things. It's waiting for you to become who you really are. And who you really are, beneath every layer of conditioning and limitation, is a prosperous being, aligned with infinite abundance. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, let yourself feel the truth of this. You are not someone who needs to struggle. You are not someone defined by past limitations. You are not someone who has to prove their worth. You are not someone limited by circumstances. You are pure consciousness, having a temporary human experience, and consciousness itself is limitless, creative, and abundant. The poverty consciousness was never you. It was just programming. The struggle was never your destiny. It was just conditioning. The limitation was never your nature. It was just forgetfulness of who you really are. And now you remember. Now you know. Now you're ready to answer the call. Lech Lecha. Go to yourself. Journey to the abundant being you've always been beneath the costume of limitation. Become who you really are, and watch as your entire reality reorganizes itself to match that truth. The prosperity you've been seeking has been inside you all along, waiting for you to come home to yourself. Welcome home. Welcome to your naturally abundant self. Welcome to the wealth that's been yours from the beginning, waiting only for you to claim it by being authentically, fully, completely yourself. This is the Jewish secret of wealth. Not strategies or techniques, though those help. Not beliefs or affirmations, though those support. The ultimate secret is this: prosperity is your nature, not your achievement. Wealth is your identity, not your destination. Abundance is who you are, not what you acquire. Everything in this book has been designed to help you remember this truth and embody it so completely that your external reality has no choice but to reflect it back to you. You are the secret. You are the wealth. You are the abundance. Now go forth and be yourself. Lech Lecha.